The sun is lowering in the western sky, casting long shadows across the countryside. You find yourself on a road, not a modern paved highway, but a medieval track, rutted and uneven, worn into the earth by centuries of feet and hooves and cart wheels. The road winds through fields where the last harvest has been gathered, through patches of woodland where bare branches reach toward the darkening sky, and ahead, rising from the landscape like something built by giants, a castle. This is where your journey will take you tonight. Not as a visitor in the ordinary sense, not someone who will knock at the gate and request entrance, but as something else entirely. An invisible observer. A presence without substance. A consciousness that can drift through walls and doors, that can witness without being seen, that can explore every corner of this medieval stronghold as night settles over the land. But before you enter, before you pass beyond those formidable walls, take a moment to truly see what stands before you. Because a castle is not simply a building. It's a statement, a declaration, a physical manifestation of power and wealth and the fundamental medieval understanding that the world is dangerous and protection is paramount. You find yourself drifting through the main gateway as the day's final light touches the stone. A silent observer, invisible, watching as this fortified world prepares for nightfall. This castle is, above all else, a home. A powerful home, yes, the seat of a lord whose word shapes the lives of hundreds, but still a place where people eat and sleep and live out their days. The stone walls around you weren't always here. Centuries ago, this might have been nothing more than a wooden hall, surrounded by ditches and earthen banks. Simple, vulnerable, but as the years passed and threats grew, would give way to stone, fire-resistant, siege-resistant, built to endure. The design itself tells a story of evolution. In earlier times, many castles followed what we call the motte and bailey pattern, a raised mound with a tower looking down protectively over a lower courtyard. You can almost imagine that ancient configuration as you stand here now, even though this castle has grown beyond those humble origins. The curtain walls that surround you, these great stone barriers, create a world within a world. Protected, enclosed, safe from the dangers that roam the countryside beyond. Look up at those walls for a moment. See how they're crowned with battlements, those rhythmic up and down patterns along the top. The raised sections are called merlins, the gaps between them, crenelles. Simple words for simple geometry, but they serve a vital purpose. Defenders can duck behind the merlins for protection, then step into the crenelles to observe or to rain down arrows on any who might threaten this place. But threats feel distant now, don't they? As the light softens and the sky begins its slow fade from gold to rose to deepening blue. Behind you, the main gateway stands as the most carefully defended point in all these walls. Think about it for a moment. Every person, every cart, every animal that enters this protected world must pass through this single, scrutinized opening. The gateway is thick, sometimes 20 feet of solid stone, and fitted with multiple defenses. Heavy wooden doors, iron-banded and studded. And above, hidden in the shadows of the gatehouse, a portcullis. This iron grating, heavy as a cart full of stone, can be dropped in an instant, sealing the entrance against intruders. The chains that hold it rest silent now, but they're always there, always ready. In front of the gateway, there would have been a barbican, an outer defensive structure that forced anyone approaching to navigate a narrow, exposed path. Attackers couldn't simply rush the gates. They'd have to funnel through confined spaces, overlooked by arrow slits and murder holes. Every step would be watched, every moment vulnerable, and before that, perhaps a drawbridge. Depending on the castle's location, It might span a moat filled with murky water, or simply a deep, dry ditch designed to keep siege engines and scaling ladders at a distance. Right now, the drawbridge is down, resting solid and heavy across its supports. During the day, people and carts have rumbled across it freely. But soon, as full darkness settles, it will be raised. The chains will creak and groan. The heavy timbers will lift, and this castle will pull itself inward, like a creature folding its limbs in sleep. But we're not there yet. It's that in-between time, that twilight hour. The bailey, the courtyard around you, is still alive with the gentle sounds of a working household settling down. This open space, enclosed by protective walls, holds so much of the castle's daily life. Stables along one side, where horses shift in their stalls, occasionally nickering softly. The smell of hay and warm horseflesh drifts on the evening air. You can hear the soft, tearing sound of horses pulling mouthfuls from their mangers, the steady rhythm of their chewing, the occasional stamp of a hoof against packed earth. Elsewhere in the bailey, there are workshops now falling quiet. The blacksmith's forge, which rang all day with the percussion of hammer on anvil, has been damped down. A faint glow still emanates from it, but the work has stopped. The carpenter's shed sits silent. Wood shavings scattered near the doorway will wait until morning to be swept away. Storerooms line another wall, their heavy doors secured with iron hasps and locks. Inside, sacks of grain, barrels of salted meat, wheels of hard cheese. The stores that will feed this household through winter, through siege if necessary. Everything a castle needs to survive must be kept within these walls, protected from theft and rot and the uncertainties of the world beyond. Near the kitchen buildings, you might notice a small herb garden. Raised beds, carefully tended, where useful plants grow. Sage and thyme, rosemary and mint. In summer, their scent would be pronounced, but now, in the cooling evening air, they're more subtle. You'd have to lean close to catch their fragrance. These herbs aren't decorative, they're essential. Medicine, flavoring for food that might otherwise be bland or spoiled. Each plant has its purpose. Animals are everywhere in a castle, more than you might expect. Chickens roost in a coop built against the wall, settling now into their evening stillness. Earlier, they'd have been scratching and pecking across the courtyard, but darkness makes them vulnerable, and instinct draws them to shelter. Somewhere, pigs grunt softly in their pen. Dogs, always dogs in a medieval castle, lie near doorways or trot purposefully across the bailey on their own mysterious errands. They're working animals, guardians and hunters, and they know every corner of this place. The well stands in the center of the courtyard, its stone rim worn smooth by countless hands and rope. Water is life, especially here. A castle under siege can survive for months if it has water. This well plunges deep into the earth, reaching water that flows regardless of what happens above ground. And there are cisterns too, catchment systems that collect rainwater from the roofs and channel it into storage tanks. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is left to chance. The light is fading faster now. The sky above the courtyard shifts from blue to violet. The first stars are beginning to appear, faint pinpricks in the gathering dark. Somewhere, a servant crosses the bailey carrying a lit torch. The flame gutters and waves, casting wild shadows against the stone walls. Another light appears in a window of the keep. Then another. The castle is lighting itself from within, like a living thing becoming aware. Sound changes as daylight fails. It carries differently. During the day, noise scatters and dissipates, voices and activity filling the space with general bustle. But now, as silence settles, Individual sounds become clear and distinct. The chink of a chain somewhere. The soft clop of hooves as a last horse is led to its stable. A dog barking once, twice, then quiet. A door closing. Footsteps crossing packed earth. The ground beneath your feet, this courtyard floor, is hard-packed dirt mixed with gravel in some places, cobblestones in others. It's been walked on, ridden on, rolled over by cartwheels for decades, perhaps centuries. Every stone has been placed deliberately. Every surface serves a purpose. During heavy rain, drainage channels would carry water away to prevent flooding. Now, in the dry evening air, it's simply solid beneath your feet. Permanent. Enduring. The walls around you, those massive curtain walls, feel even more substantial as darkness gathers. They're not just barriers. They're the definition of inside and outside, safety and threat, home and wilderness. Within these walls, life is ordered, protected, comprehensible. Beyond them, well, beyond them is everything else. The forest and fields, the scattered villages, the roads where travelers move at their own risk. But here, within the bailey, within the embrace of stone, there is order. A servant emerges from the kitchen building, carrying a covered pot. You catch a brief whiff of something savory, perhaps a stew that's been simmering all afternoon. The evening meal will be served soon in the great hall, but preparations have been underway for hours. The kitchen staff works in their own rhythm, separate from the rest of the household but essential to it. Near the stables, a groom is checking the doors one final time, making sure each stall is secure. The horses are valuable, both as transportation and as symbols of status, and their care is taken seriously. Each animal has been fed, watered, brushed. Their hooves have been checked. Their tack has been cleaned and stored. Now they can rest, just as the people of the castle will rest, once night fully settles. The temperature is dropping. You can feel it in the air, that particular chill that comes when the sun's warmth finally releases its hold on the stone. During the day, these walls absorb heat. At night, they slowly give it back, but never quite enough. The cold creeps in from the ground, from the shadowed corners, from the height of the walls where no warmth lingers. Soon, those inside will be grateful for fires and thick woolen blankets. A bell rings somewhere within the keep. Not loud, but clear. A signal, perhaps, marking the hour, or calling people to evening prayers, or simply announcing that supper is ready. Whatever its specific purpose, it reminds everyone that time is measured here, that routines structure the day and night, that this household runs on order and expectation. More lights now, windows glowing warm against the darkening stone. The castle is transforming, becoming its nighttime self. The working, bustling daytime castle is fading, and the quieter, more intimate nighttime castle is emerging. This is when the outer world is shut out entirely, when the drawbridge rises, when the gates are barred, when the castle becomes an island of light and warmth in a dark countryside. You drift toward the shadow of the keep, that tall central tower that dominates the castle's interior. It rises above everything else, both a last refuge in times of danger and the heart of daily life. The Lord's private chambers are there, the great hall where the household gathers, the chapel where prayers are offered, all the most important spaces concentrated in one defensible structure. But we're not going inside just yet. For now, we linger here in the courtyard as the last light drains from the sky. A cat emerges from behind a storage building, moves silently across the open space, and disappears into darkness. Cats are welcome here, They hunt the mice and rats that would otherwise infest the grain stores. They move like ghosts, appearing and vanishing according to their own inscrutable logic. The air smells of stone and earth, horses and wood smoke. That's the distinctive scent of a castle at evening, a combination of animal warmth, cooking fires, and the mineral smell of ancient stone. Add to that the herbs from the garden, the leather from the stables, perhaps a hint of torch smoke, layers of scent that tell the story of this place. Everything is settling. The pace of movement has slowed. People walk with less urgency. Voices are lower. The day's work is largely complete, and what remains is the simple business of eating and resting and preparing for tomorrow. This is the rhythm that has repeated itself for generations. Sunrise to sunset, work and rest. The castle enduring through it all, solid and unchanging while the people within it live out their brief, bright lives. The drawbridge mechanism creaks. Slowly, with tremendous effort from the gatehouse crew above, the bridge begins to rise. Chains rattle through pulleys. Timber groans against timber. Inch by inch, the connection to the outer world is severed. Soon, not yet, but soon, the castle will be sealed. An island unto itself. Night is here. The courtyard lies in shadow now, broken only by the scattered torchlight and the warm glow from windows above. The animals have settled. The people are moving indoors. And you drift like smoke toward the entrance of the keep, ready to explore deeper into this fortified home, to discover what life is truly like inside these walls as the night unfolds. You slip through a heavy wooden door, and immediately the air changes. Warmth wraps around you like a thick blanket. Warmth that's been building all day and still lingers despite the late hour. This is the kitchen, the beating heart of the castle's sustenance, and even now, well after the evening meal has been served, it holds onto the day's accumulated heat. The space is larger than you might expect. High stone walls rise to a vaulted ceiling somewhere above in the darkness. During the day, this would be a place of organized chaos, but now, in the quiet hours of night, it rests. Not empty, never truly empty, but subdued, settled. The frantic energy of meal preparation has given way to something gentler. A large open hearth dominates one wall, and even now its embers glow like a bed of orange jewels. The fire has been banked for the night, not extinguished, never extinguished, because starting a fire from nothing is difficult and time-consuming. Better to keep it alive, breathing low and patient, ready to be coaxed back to full flame when morning comes. The heat radiating from those coals is substantial. You can feel it from several feet away, a penetrating warmth that seems to seep into your bones. The stones around the hearth are blackened from years of smoke and heat. The mortar between them has been baked hard as iron. Above the fireplace, iron hooks and chains hang down, motionless now, but during the day they would have held cooking pots suspended over the flames. Heavy cauldrons, kettles, each one positioned at exactly the right height to achieve the right temperature for whatever was being prepared. Smoke still drifts upward from the embers, rising in lazy curls toward the ceiling. The stone walls trap both warmth and smoke, creating an atmosphere that's thick and lead. Your eyes would sting if you stayed too long during the day's cooking hours, when multiple fires blazed and steam rose from boiling pots and the air became almost opaque with smoke. The ceiling, high above, is stained black from years of this, decades, perhaps centuries of accumulated soot. There are vents up there, openings in the roof designed to draw the smoke upward and out into the night air. They work, after a fashion, but medieval ventilation is imperfect at best. Much of the smoke simply circulates, trapped by stone and still air, gradually seeping out through gaps around doors and windows. It's part of the kitchen's character, this permanent haze, this scent of old fires and new ones, all blended together. Against the far wall, you notice the bread ovens. Dome-shaped, built from brick and stone, their mouths are dark now. But if you approach closely, you can still feel residual warmth emanating from them. Bread was baked earlier today, loaves upon loaves to feed the entire household. The process takes hours. First, a fire is built inside the oven itself, heating the bricks until they're almost too hot to approach. Then the ashes are scraped out, and the risen dough is placed inside on long wooden paddles. The door is sealed, and the trapped heat does its work, transforming pale dough into golden, crusty bread. The smell of that baking lingers even now. Yeast and wheat and that particular toasted sweetness that only fresh bread possesses. It mingles with all the other scents that have soaked into these walls over time. Bread is the foundation of every meal here, not a luxury but a necessity. Rich or poor, everyone eats bread. The quality might vary, fine white bread for the Lord's table, coarser dark bread for servants, but bread is constant. Near the hearth, a large iron pot still sits on a trivet, pushed to the side where the heat is less intense. Inside, a thick pottage continues its slow existence. Pottage is the workhorse of medieval cuisine, a stew made from whatever grains and vegetables are available. Barley or oats, peas or beans, onions and leeks, perhaps some herbs. Sometimes a bit of meat or bone for flavor, though often it's entirely vegetarian. It simmers for hours, thickening gradually, becoming something hearty and sustaining. This pot has likely been cooking since morning, tended periodically, stirred to prevent scorching, with ingredients added as the day progressed. Now it rests, still warm, available for anyone who might be hungry during the night. A servant on watch duty, a guard coming off patrol, someone who missed the evening meal. The pottage doesn't judge. It simply waits, patient and reliable. The kitchen smells are layered and complex. Smoke, yes, always smoke, but also the rich, earthy scent of that pottage. The lingering sweetness of bread. The sharp, mineral tang of iron from the cookware. And underneath everything, the sour-sweet smell of ale. Barrels and jugs of it are stored here, close at hand, because ale is what everyone drinks. Water alone is unreliable, often unsafe, but ale, fermented and preserved by the brewing process, is safer and more nourishing. The ale barrels are stacked near one wall, bound with iron hoops, their wood stained dark from years of use. That yeasty, slightly sour aroma seeps from them constantly. It's not unpleasant, exactly, just distinctive. Part of the kitchen's particular perfume. During the day, when jugs are filled and refilled to accompany every meal, the smell would be even stronger. Now, with everything sealed and still, it's merely present, a background note in the symphony of scents. Look up toward the ceiling beams, those massive timbers of oak that support the roof high above. Hanging from them, you can make out bundles of dried herbs, even in the dim light. Sage and rosemary, thyme and bay. They've been tied in bunches and suspended there to dry, preserving them for the months ahead. During the day, cooks would reach up and pluck what they needed, crumbling the dried leaves into pots and roasting pans. Now they simply hang, releasing their subtle fragrance into the smoky air. These herbs aren't merely for flavor, though they do that too. They are preservatives, medicines, sage to aid digestion, rosemary to preserve meat, thyme for its antiseptic properties. Every plant serves multiple purposes, and nothing is wasted. The medieval world is too practical, too close to scarcity, to waste anything that might prove useful. During the busy hours, morning preparation, the midday meal, the evening feast, the soundscape here would be overwhelming. The sharp percussion of knives against wooden cutting boards, the scrape and clatter of pots being moved, the hiss of water meeting hot iron, voices calling out instructions, asking questions, coordinating the complex dance of getting dozens of dishes ready simultaneously, the rhythmic scrape of whetstones sharpening knives, the thunk of cleavers splitting meat, the steady grinding of pestles in mortars, crushing spices and herbs. But now there's only quiet. The occasional pop from the hearth embers, a faint creak of settling wood. Somewhere, water drips slowly into a bucket, probably condensation from the stone walls, or perhaps a bucket that was filled for washing and now sits forgotten. The thick wooden door muffles sounds from the courtyard outside, but occasionally something penetrates. A distant dog bark, the low of a cow, a guard's footsteps crossing the bailey. The kitchen follows its own rhythm, dictated partly by the church bells that mark the hours and call people to prayer, and partly by the immutable schedule of human hunger. Breakfast must be prepared, the midday meal, the evening supper. Between these peaks of activity, there's the constant work of preparation. Washing, cleaning, chopping vegetables for tomorrow, kneading dough that will rise overnight, checking the stores in the connected rooms. Those service rooms surround the main kitchen like attendants around a noble. The pantry, where bread and dry goods are kept. The buttery, nothing to do with butter, despite the name, where barrels of ale and wine are stored. The cellar, cool and dark, where vegetables and fruits can be preserved in the earth's natural cold. The larder, where meat hangs, salted or smoked, protected from vermin by locked doors and watchful eyes. Each room has its purpose. Each contributes to the kitchen's ability to feed a household of 50 or 100 or more, depending on the castle's size. The logistics are staggering when you consider them. Every meal requires planning, acquiring ingredients, storing them properly, preparing them, cooking them, serving them hot, then cleaning up afterward, mountains of pots to scrub, tables to wash, floors to sweep. Near a stone basin built into the wall, you can see evidence of the day's washing up. Wooden tubs stacked to one side, buckets arranged in a row, drains cut into the floor to carry dirty water away, crude by modern standards, but effective. Everything in this kitchen is designed with practicality in mind. Stone floors that can be sluiced clean with buckets of water, walls that won't catch fire, high ceilings that accommodate smoke and heat, heavy doors that can be secured against theft. Steam mixed with smoke during the day's cooking, that particular combination of water vapor and wood smoke that creates a hazy, dreamlike atmosphere. Now, with the fires banked and no boiling pots, the steam has mostly dissipated, but moisture still clings to the stones. The walls feel slightly damp if you were to touch them, cool and damp despite the warmth from the hearth. The great iron pots and pans, the tools of the kitchen's trade, hang from hooks or sit stacked in corners. Some are massive, large enough that you could almost climb inside. Others are smaller, designed for sauces or specific dishes. All are heavy, dark with use, seasoned from years of cooking. Cast iron and wrought iron, shaped by blacksmiths, treasured by cooks. These implements will outlast generations of cooks, passing from one to the next, accumulating stories and memories that no one will ever record. On a long wooden table, its surface scarred and stained from countless hours of chopping and preparing, a few items remain. A half-peeled turnip, A knife left out, waiting to be cleaned. A wooden bowl with dried herbs in the bottom. Evidence of interrupted work, or perhaps work that will resume in just a few hours when the first servants rise to begin breakfast preparations. That table has been scrubbed countless times. You can see how the wood has worn smooth in the center where most work is done, while the edges retain more of their original texture. It's substantial, thick planks mounted on heavy legs, because it needs to withstand the constant pounding and cutting and scrubbing that defines kitchen work. Blood and vegetable juices have stained it in layers, creating a patina that no amount of scrubbing can fully remove. The light here comes from a single tallow candle, guttering in a holder near the door, and from the orange glow of the banked fire. It's enough to see by, barely. Shadows gather in the corners, making the space feel even larger than it is. The vaulted ceiling disappears into darkness. The far walls fade to black. Only the central area around the hearth remains visible, an island of dim illumination in a sea of shadow. A sound breaks the silence, footsteps approaching. The door opens with a low creak, and a servant enters, moving quietly, respectfully aware of the late hour. Perhaps a kitchen boy who sleeps here to tend the fire, or a scullery maid checking that everything is secure before seeking her own bed. They move to the hearth, take up an iron poker, and gently stir the embers. Sparks fly upward briefly, bright orange against the soot-black stone. A log is added, carefully positioned. The fire accepts it without complaint, and gradually, the glow strengthens. The servant moves to the pottage pot, lifts the lid, peers inside. Satisfied that it's not burning, they replace the lid and move on. Perhaps they fill a cup with water from a covered bucket. Perhaps they take a small piece of bread from the day's baking, eating it quickly, mechanically, before returning to whatever task or rest awaits them. Then they're gone, the door closing behind them with a solid thunk. And once again, the kitchen settles into its nighttime stillness. The fire breathes. The building creaks. Water continues its slow drip into that forgotten bucket. Outside, the castle sleeps its protected sleep, secure behind stone walls and locked gates. But the kitchen never truly rests. It waits. Rests, yes, but waits too. Because morning will come, as it always does, and with morning comes hunger. And hunger must be answered. The warmth here is almost hypnotic. After the coolness of the courtyard, this residual heat is deeply comforting. You understand why kitchen servants might choose to sleep near the hearth when winter settles hard over the land. Why this room, smoky and work-worn as it is, might feel like the heart of the castle in more ways than one. Food is life. Fire is warmth. And this room provides both, ceaselessly, day after day, year after year. The herbs sway slightly in a draught you can't quite locate. Sage and rosemary, thyme and bay, their shadows dance against the wall, elongated and strange in the firelight. The smell intensifies briefly, that clean, sharp scent of herbs mixing with smoke and bread and ale. It's the smell of survival, of human ingenuity, of the endless work required to turn raw ingredients into sustenance. Time feels different here in the kitchen at night. Slower, thicker, as if the heat and smoke and accumulated labor of countless meals has somehow altered the way hours pass. You could stay here, watching the fire breathe, listening to the silence between sounds. But the castle has more to reveal. Other spaces, other stories. The door beckons. Beyond it, corridors lead deeper into the keep. To the great hall where the household gathered earlier for supper. To the chapel where prayers echo against stone. To private chambers where people sleep, secure in their beds, trusting in walls and guards and the eternal rhythms of castle life. But you'll carry the kitchen with you as you go. Its warmth, its smells, its patient, enduring presence. Because no matter where else you wander in this fortified home, the kitchen remains, waiting for dawn, waiting for hungry mouths, waiting to fulfill its purpose once again. You pass through the screen's passage, that transitional corridor between the working kitchen and the formal heart of the castle, and emerge into vastness. The great hall opens before you like a cathedral of domestic life, and even in darkness, even in silence, its grandeur is unmistakable. This is the showpiece of the castle, the room that announces wealth and power to anyone who enters. The space where a lord demonstrates, through sheer architectural ambition, that he possesses the resources and vision to create something magnificent. During the day, this hall would pulse with life and activity. But now, in the deep quiet of night, it rests empty and echoing and somehow even more impressive in its stillness. The dimensions alone take your breath away. Long and rectangular, the hall stretches away from you into shadow. Your eyes follow the length of it, 40 feet, perhaps 50 or more. It's difficult to judge in the dim light, but it's the height that truly staggers. The walls rise and rise, climbing toward a roof that seems impossibly far overhead. This is not a room built to human scale. This is a room built to inspire awe. Those walls, thick stone, rising perhaps 30 feet before they meet the ceiling. In daylight, you would see them more clearly, but even now you can sense their solidity, their permanence. Stone blocks fitted together with such precision that the mortar lines are barely visible. These walls will stand for centuries. They were built by craftsmen who understood that their work would outlive them, outlive their children, outlive everyone they knew. Above, the ceiling reveals itself in fragments as your eyes adjust to the darkness. Heavy timber beams span the width of the hall, enormous oak logs hewn and shaped and hoisted into place by teams of workers. Or perhaps, depending on when this castle was built and how ambitious its creator, the ceiling might be vaulted stone, arched and ribbed, a feat of engineering that seems to defy gravity itself. Some of the grandest halls feature hammerbeam roofs, those magnificent wooden structures where massive beams project from the walls, supported by carved brackets, creating a ceiling that appears almost to float. Right now, all you can see are dark shapes against deeper darkness. The suggestion of beams, the hint of height, but you know they're there, holding up the roof that protects this space from rain and snow and the weight of passing seasons. At one end of the hall, the far end, the elevated end, there's a minstrel's gallery. A balcony set into the wall, accessible by a narrow staircase, where musicians would stand during feasts and celebrations. During the evening meal, perhaps a few hours ago, someone might have played up there. A harp or a lute, its notes cascading down into the hall below, adding music to the sound of conversation and the clatter of dishes. But now the gallery stands empty, a dark rectangle cut into the stone, silent and waiting for the next occasion when it will be needed. The windows here are larger than elsewhere in the castle. That's one of the hall's luxuries, more light. During fortifications, windows are vulnerabilities, points where walls are breached and thinned. But the Great Hall can afford to be generous with its openings because it sits within the castle's protected interior, shielded by outer walls and gates. These windows let in precious daylight, making the space feel less like a cave and more like a proper room for living. Of course, glass is rare and expensive. Most castles, even grand ones, make do with alternatives. Heavy wooden shutters that can be closed against weather and cold, or frames stretched with oiled cloth, linen treated until it becomes translucent, allowing light through while keeping out wind and rain. Some windows might have a combination, a few precious panes of glass in the upper sections, where they're harder to damage, and shutters or cloth below. Right now, the shutters are closed and fastened. Night has settled completely outside, and there's no point leaving windows open to the cold. The darkness beyond the walls is total. No streetlights, no electric glow, just pure rural night. Inside, the hall is warmer, though not by much. The stone holds onto the day's accumulated heat, releasing it slowly, reluctantly, as the hours pass. The source of that warmth, or what warmth remains, is the fireplace. In older halls, there might be a central hearth, an open fire pit in the middle of the floor with smoke rising to vents in the roof. But many later halls, grander halls, feature massive wall fireplaces instead. Enormous structures, large enough to walk into if they weren't filled with burning wood. The hearth opening might be 6 feet wide, 4 feet tall. The chimney above rising up through the thickness of the wall and out above the roofline. This fireplace, like the kitchen hearth you left behind, has been banked for the night. The blaze that roared during the evening has been carefully managed down to glowing coals. They pulse with a deep orange light, breathing gently, giving off steady heat without flame. It's enough to keep the immediate area comfortable, but the far reaches of the hall, those distant corners, that high ceiling, are cold. Heat rises and dissipates, absorbed by stone and wood and the sheer volume of air in this vast room. Smoke still drifts upward from the embers, though it's thin now, barely visible. During the day's full fire, smoke would have filled the upper portions of the hall, gathering beneath the roof beams before gradually finding its way out through vents and gaps. It's one of the realities of medieval life. Smoke is everywhere. You learn to live with it, to ignore the sting in your eyes, to accept the smell that permeates everything. Clothes, hair, the very walls themselves. Near the fireplace, at the far end of the hall on a raised platform, sits the dais. This elevated section, perhaps a foot higher than the main floor, is where the Lord's table stands. Or stood, rather, because the trestle tables have been dismantled now that the meal is finished. During the feast, the Lord would sit here with his family and most honored guests, looking out over the hall, presiding over the household's gathering. Everyone could see him. His position, literally elevated, reinforced his status figuratively. The closer you sat to the dais, the higher your status. Distance from the Lord's table was a precise measure of your importance in the household hierarchy. Knights and senior household officers near the front. Lesser servants and workers toward the back. Visitors and petitioners wherever their rank dictated. Everyone knew their place. The arrangement itself was a visible map of power and privilege. The walls throughout the hall are softened by tapestries. Even in the dim firelight, you can make out these massive woven hangings, though their colors and details are reduced to suggestions and shadows. Tapestries serve multiple purposes. They add warmth, both literal and aesthetic. They dampen sound, preventing the hall from becoming a chaos of echoes. And they tell stories, displaying the Lord's lineage, his ancestors, his heraldic symbols, his connection to power and history. A well-chosen tapestry is a form of propaganda, reminding everyone who enters of the family's legitimacy and grandeur. These particular tapestries might depict hunting scenes, or biblical stories, or the deeds of ancient heroes. The threads, wool and silk if the Lord is wealthy, would show remarkable detail in proper light. Forests and castles, knights on horseback, ladies in flowing gowns, mythical beasts, all rendered in the patient, painstaking work of skilled weavers. Now, at night, they're merely dark shapes against the walls, their stories hidden until morning brings light to reveal them again. The floor beneath your feet is covered with rushes. Not a solid surface, but layers of dried reeds and grasses, scattered thickly across the flagstones. These rushes serve as a primitive but effective covering. They provide some insulation against the cold stone. They absorb spills and debris, and when they become too soiled or worn, they can be swept away and replaced with fresh ones. Sometimes herbs are mixed with the rushes, sweet-smelling plants like meadowsweet or chamomile, to combat the less pleasant odors that accumulate in a busy hall. Walking across these rushes, you'd hear a soft rustling, a whisper of dried vegetation. Your feet would sink slightly with each step, cushioned by the layers beneath. It's not elegant by modern standards, but it's practical, and practicality governs much of medieval life. This great hall is many things. During the day, it transforms constantly, adapting to whatever purpose is needed. In the morning, it might serve as a courtroom, where the Lord hears disputes and renders judgment. Tenants bringing grievances, villagers seeking arbitration, the Lord sitting in state, dispensing justice as both right and responsibility demand. Later, it becomes a workspace. Clerks at a side table, writing letters or updating account books. Servants folding linens or polishing metalwork. A meeting of household officers, discussing supplies or security or the 100 details required to keep a castle functioning. At mealtimes, twice a day for most households, sometimes 3 times for the wealthy, the hall becomes a dining room. Trestle tables are assembled, boards laid across supports. Benches are positioned, and then the household gathers. Lords and ladies at the high table, knights and officials at the tables nearest the dais, servants and workers filling in the rest of the space. Bread and salt and whatever dishes the kitchen has prepared. Ale flowing freely, conversation rising and falling like waves. And at night, after the tables are dismantled and the benches pushed to the walls, the hall becomes a bedroom. Not for everyone. The Lord and his family have private chambers elsewhere, but for many, servants and men-at-arms, unmarried knights and household workers. They spread straw pallets on the floor, wrap themselves in blankets or cloaks, and sleep here in the communal warmth and relative safety. Right now, the hall is empty of people. The evening meal ended hours ago. The tables have been taken down and stacked against the walls. The benches stand in neat rows, waiting for tomorrow. Anyone who sleeps here hasn't arrived yet. Or perhaps they're bedded down so quietly that you can't distinguish them from the shadows. The silence is profound, not complete. A castle is never completely silent, but close. The pop and hiss of the dying fire provides irregular percussion. Somewhere overhead, timber creaks as it cools, the wood contracting minutely in the night air. A draft moves through the hall, though you can't identify its source. Perhaps a gap around a shutter, perhaps the chimney drawing air. It's just enough to stir the tapestries slightly, making them sway like living things breathing in their sleep. The screen's passage behind you, the corridor you entered through, serves as a barrier between the working areas and this formal space. Screen simply means partition, and usually there's a wooden partition wall with doorways cut through it, separating the hall proper from the service corridors beyond. It's a buffer, keeping kitchen noise and smells from overwhelming the hall, while still allowing servants to pass through easily when bringing food or clearing dishes. Those servants moved through here earlier, carrying platters and pitchers, serving the assembled household. A carefully choreographed dance of hospitality. Now the passage is quiet. The kitchen beyond is settling towards sleep, as you witnessed. And here in the hall, the evidence of the evening meal has been cleared away. A few crumbs perhaps, hidden in the rushes. A stain on the floor where wine was spilled. But otherwise, the space has been returned to its empty grandeur. If you could see the dais more clearly, you'd notice details that reinforce its importance. Perhaps a canopy over the Lord's seat. Certainly finer chairs rather than benches. The wall behind might display the family's coat of arms, painted directly onto the plaster or carved into wooden panels. Everything here whispers, or shouts, about status and power and the right to command. But in darkness, those distinctions fade somewhat. The dais is simply a raised platform. The Lord's chair is simply a piece of furniture. The great hall, stripped of activity and light, reveals itself as what it fundamentally is, a very large room. Impressive, yes. Beautiful in its proportions and craft, but also just a room. A space defined by stone and wood and air. The cold is more noticeable now. The warmth from the hearth only extends so far, and the rest of the hall is chilly. Your breath would mist if you were breathing. The stone floor, beneath its covering of rushes, radiates cold upward. The walls, several feet thick, hold the night's chill in their mass. Windows, even shuttered, are points where cold seeps through. This is why people cluster near fires. Why they wear multiple layers of wool and linen. Why they huddle together at night for warmth. Medieval castles are marvels of defense and architecture, but they are not, by any stretch, comfortable in the way we understand comfort today. They're cold and drafty and smoky and damp. Beautiful, certainly. Impressive, absolutely. But harsh. A sound drifts in from somewhere. Perhaps a door closing in a distant part of the keep. Perhaps a guard on his rounds, his footsteps echoing through corridors. The sound reaches the great hall, bounces off the high ceiling, and fades. Then silence again. You drift toward one of the tapestries, approaching close enough to make out the suggestion of its design. Even in near darkness, you can sense the craftsmanship, the density of the weave, the way it hangs, heavy and substantial, from its mounting rod. These pieces are valuable beyond their beauty. They're portable wealth. In times of need, tapestries can be sold or used as collateral. They can be packed up and moved if the household relocates. They're art, insulation, and investment all at once. The fire breathes. Orange light pulses gently, casting shifting shadows across the hall. The coals are losing their battle against entropy, cooling gradually, but they'll last until morning when someone, a kitchen boy, probably, or a junior servant, will come to rebuild the fire. New wood will be added. Bellows will coax flame from ember. And the cycle will continue, as it has continued for as long as this hall has stood. Time feels suspended here. The hall exists between states, between day and night, between activity and rest, between its public role and its private emptiness. It's a threshold space in this threshold hour, neither fully asleep nor awake, simply waiting. And you, drifting like smoke through this magnificent room, are waiting too, waiting to explore deeper, to find the private spaces where the castle's heart truly beats, the chambers where people dream their medieval dreams, the chapel where prayers rise to vaulted stone, the battlements where guards watch the night. But for now, for this moment, you linger in the great hall, letting its presence wash over you, feeling the weight of its history, the accumulated lives that have filled this space with laughter and argument, feasting and judgment, music and silence. All of it layered here, invisible but present, soaked into the very stones. The fire settles with a soft sound. A coal shifts, orange light flickers and steadies, and the great hall continues its patient vigil, holding the darkness at bay, waiting for morning when it will transform once more into the living, bustling heart of castle life. You ascend a narrow spiral staircase, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, climbing from the great hall toward the private chambers above. The stone steps curve upward in darkness, each one slightly uneven, shaped by the mason's hand and then reshaped by countless feet. Your hand, if you had one, would trail along the central pillar, that stone column around which the entire staircase spirals. It's cold to the touch, perpetually cold, no matter the season. At the top, a corridor stretches away, punctuated by heavy wooden doors. These are the sleeping chambers, private rooms, a luxury that most of the world can never afford. The great hall below serves as dormitory for many, but here, in these chambers, the Lord and his family and perhaps a few honored guests find their rest behind closed doors. You slip through one of these doors, passing like breath through the gap between door and frame, and find yourself in a sleeping chamber. The room is small by the standards of the great hall, but still generous, perhaps 15 feet square, with a ceiling that slopes upward to follow the roofline above. The walls are stone, as everything here is stone, thick blocks that insulate and protect but also trap the cold and damp that seep in from outside. The darkness here is nearly complete. There's a single candle burning on a small table near the bed, its flame barely larger than your fingernail, guttering slightly in drafts you cannot see but can sense. The light it provides is meager, casting more shadow than illumination, but it's enough. Enough to see the general shapes. Enough to keep the absolute darkness at bay. Enough to provide comfort to whoever sleeps here. Because darkness in the medieval world is not empty. It's filled with fears both real and imagined. The floor is covered with rushes, just as in the great hall, though perhaps these are fresher, changed more often. They rustle softly underfoot, or they would, if feet were walking across them. The sound is distinctive, that particular whisper of dried plant material shifting and settling. Beneath the rushes, the floor is stone, flagstones fitted together, cold and unyielding. The rushes provide some small insulation, some small softness, but mostly they're symbolic, a barrier, however thin, between human warmth and stone cold. The bed dominates the room. It's not large by modern standards. Most medieval beds wouldn't be, but it's substantial. A wooden frame, solid oak darkened with age, with posts rising at each corner. These posts support a canopy overhead, and from that canopy hang thick curtains. Heavy wool, or possibly even velvet if this household is wealthy. The curtains are currently drawn back, tied to the posts, allowing you to see the bed itself. But when someone sleeps, those curtains would be pulled closed, creating a small, enclosed space within the larger room. This isn't merely decorative. Those curtains are essential. They trap body heat, creating a pocket of relative warmth in an otherwise frigid room. They block drafts that would otherwise flow across the sleeper. They provide privacy, important when servants might enter the room, or when multiple people share the chamber. And they offer psychological comfort, a boundary between the vulnerable sleeping self and the dark, cold world beyond. The bed's foundation is a web of ropes stretched across the wooden frame, tightened and knotted to create a supporting surface. Over time, these ropes sag and must be retightened, hence the old phrase, sleep tight. Upon these ropes lies the mattress, a large fabric sack stuffed with straw and, if the sleeper is fortunate, wool. The straw provides bulk and structure, while the wool adds some softness, some give. It's not comfortable by modern standards, but it's far better than sleeping on the floor or on a simple pallet of straw. Covering the mattress are linens, sheets of linen fabric, woven from flax, surprisingly fine and soft after many washings. These sheets protect the sleeper from the roughness of the straw beneath. Over the sheets lie blankets, wool, thick and warm, woven tight to keep out the cold. And atop everything, if the household is prosperous, might be a coverlet of fur. Fox or rabbit for lesser chambers. Ermine or sable for the very wealthy. The weight alone provides comfort, and the warmth is undeniable. But even with all these layers, with the curtains drawn and blankets piled high, sleeping in a medieval chamber is not easy. The cold is relentless. Stone walls, no matter how thick, cannot keep it out entirely. They absorb the exterior cold and radiate it inward. Touch the wall now, if you could, and you'd find it damp in places, moisture condensing from the warmer interior air meeting cold stone. This dampness never fully leaves. It's part of the room's character, an ever-present reminder that nature is just on the other side of these walls, held back but never fully defeated. Gaps exist everywhere, around the window shutters, no matter how carefully they're fitted, between the floorboards and the walls, around the door frame, where the ceiling beams penetrate the walls. Each gap is a pathway for drafts, those invisible currents of cold air that snake through the room, finding any exposed skin, any gap in the blankets. You learn to cocoon yourself completely, to cover even your head, leaving only a small opening for breath. The people who sleep here, and someone does sleep here, though they haven't yet come to bed or perhaps have already left for some nighttime necessity, would be clothed. No one sleeps naked in a medieval castle unless they're foolish or ill. They wear long linen shirts, called shifts or chemises, that reach to the knees or beyond. Perhaps woolen hose as well. Certainly caps to cover their heads and trap the warmth that escapes from the scalp. Even with all the blankets and curtains and furs, you need every layer you can manage. Near the bed, barely visible in the candlelight, sits a chamber pot. It's partially hidden beneath the bed frame, tucked into shadow but accessible when needed. Because leaving this room in the middle of a winter night, venturing down cold corridors to the guardrobe or privy tower, is something to be avoided if at all possible. The chamber pot is practical, necessary, unmentionable but essential. In the morning, a servant will empty it, carry it away discreetly, clean it, and return it for the next night's use. Some chambers have a close stool as well, a box with a hole cut in the top and a container beneath, essentially a portable toilet that offers slightly more dignity than a chamber pot. It might have a cushioned seat, might have a lid to contain odors, but the principle is the same. Indoor sanitation of the most basic sort, born of necessity and cold. The air in the chamber is close, not fresh. Windows are shuttered tight against the night, and there's no ventilation beyond the inevitable drafts through gaps. The candle flame consumes oxygen and produces smoke, though not as much as the tallow candles used in less important spaces. This might be a beeswax candle, cleaner burning, less smoky, but still contributing to the enclosed feeling of the air. And there are smells. The rushes on the floor, giving off their grassy, musty scent. The wool blankets, which carry the smell of the sheep they came from, especially when they become damp. The chamber pot, no matter how well maintained. Smoke that has seeped into the very stones from countless fires in countless rooms throughout the castle. And underlying everything, the smell of stone itself, mineral, ancient, slightly metallic. But these smells aren't unpleasant. Exactly. They're just present, part of the atmosphere. You'd notice them immediately if you were transported here from the modern world, but to someone who lives this life, they're as invisible as air. This is simply what life smells like. Listen now to the sounds of this chamber. The candle occasionally sputters, its flame dancing. Wax drips slowly onto the iron holder beneath, each drop making a tiny sound as it solidifies. The bed itself creaks softly, even though no one is in it. The wood settling, responding to temperature changes, to its own weight. The curtains move slightly in those omnipresent drafts, fabric brushing against fabric, a sound like a whispered secret. Beyond this room, through the thick door and stone walls, other sounds filter through. From somewhere in the castle, footsteps echo, someone walking, unhurried, on their way to or from some late-night task. A cough, muffled by distance and stone. The low murmur of voices, too far away to distinguish words, just the rhythm of conversation. A dog barking once in the courtyard below, the sound rising through the night air and penetrating even here. And if you listen very carefully, you can hear the castle itself. The sound of a building breathing, stone expanding and contracting with temperature changes. Wind pressing against the walls, finding gaps, whistling softly through crevices. Water moving somewhere in the walls, perhaps drainage from the floors above, perhaps rain that seeped in and is now finding its way down through mortar and stone. These sounds are constant, eternal, the background music of life in a medieval fortress. The sleeping arrangement here suggests a person of some status. A single bed, not shared with servants or other household members, indicates privacy and rank. But in many chambers, sleeping is communal. Lower status members of the household might share beds, 2 or 3 to a mattress, combining their body heat for warmth. Children certainly sleep together, piled like puppies in whatever space is allocated to them. Even married couples might share their chamber with servants who sleep on pallets on the floor, separated from their employers only by those bed curtains and the social understanding of privacy. Those pallets, simple sleeping arrangements for servants, are just straw-filled sacks laid directly on the rushes, with perhaps a single blanket. No frames, no elaborate curtains, no pretense of comfort. You find your spot on the floor, wrap yourself in whatever covering you have, and sleep. It's cold. It's uncomfortable, but it's better than sleeping in the hall with dozens of others, better than sleeping in the stables or outbuildings, better than sleeping outside where cold and danger both wait. The bedtime routine, which has already concluded in this chamber, would have been simple but important. Prayers first, always prayers. Kneeling beside the bed, hands clasped, giving thanks for the day and asking protection through the dangerous hours of darkness. Then the careful process of closing the shutters if they weren't already closed, checking that they're latched tight, banking the fire if there's a hearth in the room, covering the coals so they'll last until morning, blowing out all but one candle to conserve expensive wax or tallow. Finally, climbing into bed, pulling the curtains closed, arranging the blankets, and settling into the mattress's uneven embrace. And then, waiting for sleep. Sometimes it comes quickly, especially after a long day of physical labor or mental strain. Sometimes it's elusive, kept at bay by cold feet or an uncomfortable position or worries that circle endlessly in the dark. You adjust your position, trying not to disturb the person sleeping beside you if you're sharing. You pull the blankets higher, tuck them under your chin. You listen to the sounds of the night and wait. The candle beside the bed has burned lower now, its pool of light even smaller than before. Soon it will gutter out entirely, and the darkness will be complete. Medieval darkness, the darkness of a world without electricity, without streetlights, without any artificial illumination beyond fire. It's a darkness that feels solid, tangible, almost oppressive if you're not accustomed to it. But it's also restful, in its way. Without light, the body knows to sleep. Without distraction, rest comes more naturally. A sound from the bed. Someone is here after all. So still and quiet that you hadn't noticed. A shift of position. The rustle of straw within the mattress. A soft exhalation. They're sleeping deeply, lost in whatever dreams visit medieval minds. Dreams of work and weather, family and survival, heaven and hell. The same fundamental human concerns that have always occupied sleeping minds, just filtered through a different context, a different world. Their breathing is steady, slow, not quite a snore but heading in that direction. Beneath the covers, beneath the drawn curtains, they're warm enough. Not comfortable, perhaps, but warm enough. And that's sufficient. That's the standard against which medieval life is measured. Sufficient. Adequate. Enough to survive and, if fortune favors, enough to thrive. The chamber itself seems to settle around this sleeping figure. The stone walls stand guardian. The thick door, secured with an iron latch, keeps unwanted visitors out. The window shutters hold back the night. And within this protected space, within the embrace of curtains and blankets and the ancient security of stone, sleep happens. Rest comes. The body repairs itself, preparing for another day of medieval life with all its challenges and small triumphs. You drift toward the door, ready to explore further. But you pause for a moment, looking back at the bed with its closed curtains, at the dying candle, at the rushes on the floor. This room, simple as it is, represents luxury and privilege. Most people in this medieval world will never sleep in such comfort. They'll never know the security of stone walls or the warmth of wool blankets or the privacy of a closed door. They'll sleep in cottages with earthen floors, in hovels that barely keep out the rain, in circumstances that would horrify anyone from the modern world. But here, in this castle, in this chamber, there is relative comfort, relative safety. And as you slip back through the door and into the corridor beyond, you carry with you the quiet peace of this sleeping space, the sense of rest earned and rest taken, the deep, patient rhythm of breath in darkness, the eternal human need for shelter and warmth and a place, however cold and uncomfortable by modern standards, to call home. You descend now from the private chambers, leaving behind the relative comfort of proper beds and closed doors, and begin to notice the other sleepers. The ones tucked into corners, curled in doorways, stretched across storage room floors. This is where most of the castle's inhabitants spend their nights, not in chambers with curtained beds, but in whatever spaces they can claim as their own, however temporarily. There is no servant's wing in this medieval castle. No neat corridor of identical rooms, each with a bed and a chest and a window. That concept, dedicated housing for staff, won't exist for centuries yet. Instead, servants sleep wherever their space, wherever their duties place them, wherever they can find a spot that offers some small measure of shelter from the cold and drafts that pervade every corner of this stone fortress. The castle's population is larger than you might imagine. Beyond the lord and his immediate family, beyond the knights and noble guests, there are dozens of others. Grooms who tend the horses, kitchen staff who prepare meals, laundresses who wash linens, porters who carry goods, watchmen who guard the gates, cleaners who sweep floors and empty chamber pots, pages and squires learning their trade. Each one needs to sleep somewhere, and the castle accommodates them all, after a fashion, in an improvised patchwork of resting places. Pass through a narrow corridor now, one of the many passageways that thread through the castle's interior like veins through a body. The walls are close here, the ceiling low. This isn't a grand space meant to impress, just a functional route between one part of the castle and another. And there, against the wall, you see a sleeping form. A servant, wrapped in a rough woolen blanket, lying on a straw pallet no thicker than your hand. The pallet is simply a sack stuffed with straw, placed directly on the cold stone floor. No frame, no ropes, no mattress in any meaningful sense. Just straw and stone with a body between them. The servant, perhaps a young man, perhaps a woman, it's hard to tell in the darkness, is curled tightly, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around torso, conserving every bit of warmth their body produces. The blanket is thin, worn at the edges, and clearly insufficient against the cold that radiates from the stones. But it's what they have, and so it's what they use. Their breath forms small clouds in the cold air, visible for just a moment before dissipating. They're not sleeping peacefully. No one sleeps peacefully in these conditions, but they're sleeping deeply enough, exhausted by a day that probably began before dawn and ended only recently. The sleep of someone who has no choice but to rest, however uncomfortable, because tomorrow will demand the same endless labor, and the body must recover what strength it can. Move along the corridor, deeper into the working heart of the castle, and you find more. In a corner where two passageways meet, another pallet. This one occupied by someone older, their weathered face just visible above the blanket's edge. Perhaps a senior servant, someone who spent decades in this castle's service. You might expect their seniority to grant them better accommodation, but it doesn't. Age brings responsibility, perhaps respect, but not comfort. They sleep here, in this corner, just as they've probably slept for years. Near the kitchen, that warm, smoky domain you visited earlier, several servants have claimed spots on the floor. The heat from the banked hearth makes this a desirable location, relatively speaking. It's still cold, but it's less cold than elsewhere. The stone here has absorbed warmth throughout the day and releases it slowly through the night. These sleeping figures are arranged like petals around a flower, all oriented toward the hearth, seeking its residual heat. One of them stirs slightly, pulling their blanket higher, then settles again. Their work-roughened hands are visible, clasped beneath their chin. Hands that have scrubbed pots and hauled water and chopped vegetables and performed 1,000 other tasks today. Tomorrow, those hands will do it all again. But for now, they rest. The kitchen boys, the youngest servants, often children of 10 or 12 years, sleep closest to the hearth itself. Their small forms are barely distinguishable from the shadows. They're responsible for maintaining the fire through the night, for adding wood when needed, for ensuring that the coals never die completely. It's a responsibility, yes, but also a privilege, because it means they sleep in the warmest spot available to someone of their station. One of them is snoring softly, a child's snore, innocent and oblivious. Another shifts in sleep, perhaps dreaming of home, of family, of the village they left behind to come work in this castle. Most servants here aren't local. They're drawn from surrounding lands, sometimes from considerable distances, sent by families hoping to improve their prospects or simply to have one less mouth to feed. In the storerooms, those practical spaces lined with barrels and sacks, you find more improvised beds. A straw pallet wedged between grain sacks. Another in the corner near the door, positioned so the servant sleeping there can hear if anyone tries to enter during the night. These storage spaces are jealously guarded. Food is wealth, and theft is always a concern. So someone sleeps here, unofficial guardian, their presence as much a deterrent as any lock. The air in the storerooms is thick with smells. Grain, slightly musty. Salted meat, sharp and preservative. Dried fish, pungent even through barrels. Herbs hanging from beams, their scent mixing with everything else. And underneath it all, the smell of the straw pallets themselves. Old straw, sometimes damp, often harboring insects, but better than nothing. Better than sleeping on bare stone. Climb a narrow service stair now, following where servants' feet have worn the steps smooth, and emerge into an upper corridor. Here, outside the door to a noble's chamber, another servant sleeps. This is a personal attendant, someone whose duty is to be immediately available should their master or mistress need anything during the night. A cup of water, help with the chamber pot, assistance with some sudden concern or request. They cannot sleep in the chamber itself. That would be presumptuous, an invasion of their employer's privacy, but they cannot be too far away either. So they sleep here, in the corridor, on a slightly better pallet than some others you've seen. Perhaps they even have a thin cushion for their head, a small concession to the fact that they're considered valuable, trusted. But they're still on the floor, still cold, still at the mercy of drafts that sweep through the corridor. Privacy, for these servants, is a concept that barely exists. They sleep in spaces others walk through. Their rest is interrupted by footsteps, by voices, by the normal nighttime movements of a castle that never entirely sleeps. Someone passing to check on the watch. Someone returning from the guardrobe. Someone on an errand from one part of the castle to another. Each passage might wake the sleeping servants, or might not. They learn to sleep through disturbances, to rouse only when truly necessary. Their belongings are few and kept close. A servant might own an extra shirt, perhaps kept rolled up beneath their head as both pillow and safeguard against theft. A small eating knife, tucked into their belt even while sleeping. Maybe a wooden cup or bowl, their personal utensil for meals. A comb, if they're fortunate. A religious medal or token, worn on a cord around the neck. That's it. That's everything they own in the world, and it's all within arm's reach as they sleep. Under the roof itself, in the spaces beneath the timber beams and thatch or tiles, more servants have found places to sleep. These attic spaces are accessed by ladders, not proper stairs, and they're barely tall enough to stand in even at the center. The roof angles down sharply on both sides, creating spaces that are more crawl space than room. But they offer something valuable, a degree of separation from the rest of the castle. Up here, beneath the roof, a servant can feel almost alone, almost private. Yes, there are others. You can see 2, 3, perhaps 4 pallets arranged in a row, but at least they're not in a corridor where anyone might pass. This is their space, however cramped and uncomfortable. The roof itself is just above, close enough to touch. During rain, you'd hear every drop, a constant drumming that would make sleep difficult. During winter, snow might accumulate above, adding weight and cold. During summer, the space would bake, becoming almost unbearable. But right now, on this night, it's simply cold and dark and close. The air is stale. There's no ventilation up here except what seeps through gaps in the roof, but it's sheltered. One of the servants sleeping here is older, a woman with grey hair visible beneath her cap. Perhaps she's a senior laundress or an experienced cook, someone who's earned this small privilege of attic space through years of service. She's wrapped in 2 blankets, a luxury suggesting she's managed to accumulate slightly more than the minimum. Her breathing is raspy, suggesting a cold or perhaps the permanent chest conditions that plague people who spend their lives in smoky, damp environments. Beside her, a younger woman sleeps, possibly her daughter, possibly an apprentice. The relationship between servants in a castle is complex, part hierarchy, part family, part simple coexistence born of shared hardship. They look out for each other, after a fashion, because who else will? The Lord doesn't concern himself with individual servants' welfare beyond ensuring they can do their work. So they form their own networks of care and obligation. The sounds up here are different from elsewhere in the castle. You're closer to the outside world. Wind moves across the roof, creating subtle whistles and moans as it finds gaps and edges. Birds might nest in the eaves, and you can hear their occasional rustling and chirping. Somewhere, a beam creaks as temperature changes cause the wood to expand or contract. It's a more intimate soundscape, less echoing and vast than the great hall below, more immediate and encompassing. Back down now, descending the ladder carefully, and into the great hall itself. You've been here before, when it was empty, but now you see it's not quite as empty as you thought. Along the walls, far from the central hearth's residual warmth, more pallets are arranged. These belong to men-at-arms, soldiers who serve the castle's garrison. They're not quite servants, their status is slightly higher, their duties more specialized, but their sleeping arrangements are barely better. Each has a pallet and blanket. Some have additional items, a cloak rolled up as a pillow, a sword belt kept close at hand, ready to be grabbed in an emergency. They sleep in their shirts and hose, ready to respond quickly if the watch bells ring or if some alarm is raised. Their sleep is the sleep of soldiers everywhere. Light, ready, prepared to wake fully alert at a moment's notice. One of them snores thunderously, a sound that would be comical if it weren't so intrusive. But no one complains. Everyone is too tired, too cold, too focused on grabbing whatever rest they can before dawn brings another day of drills, guard duty, maintenance of equipment, and the 100 other tasks that fill a soldier's life in peacetime. The smells here in the hall are strong. Unwashed bodies, bathing is infrequent, water is precious, and privacy is rare. Wool that's absorbed sweat and smoke and the general atmosphere of medieval life. Straw from the pallets, some of it old enough to be decomposing slightly. The lingering scent of the evening meal. Whatever was eaten here has left traces in the rushes on the floor. And underneath everything, that perpetual smell of smoke and stone that characterizes every interior space in the castle. But again, these smells aren't necessarily unpleasant to those who live with them. They're just normal. The smell of life. The smell of humanity in close quarters. You'd only notice them acutely if you were experiencing them for the first time. For the people sleeping here, these scents are as invisible as the air itself. A servant crosses the hall now, moving quietly but not silently. Perhaps they're on their way to the guardrobe, or perhaps they're one of the kitchen boys checking on the fires. They pick their way carefully between the sleeping forms, trying not to disturb anyone, but their footsteps on the rush-covered floor are audible. A few of the sleepers stir slightly, adjust their positions, then settle again without fully waking. This is the reality of sleeping in communal spaces. Rest is constantly interrupted. Privacy is impossible. Your sleep is shaped by the sounds and movements of everyone around you. But again, this is normal. This is life. Medieval people don't expect the isolated, quiet sleeping conditions that modern life takes for granted. They sleep as people have always slept through most of human history, in groups, in shared spaces, surrounded by others. The castle's nighttime population is spread throughout its spaces like seeds scattered on soil, taking root wherever conditions allow. Under stairs, in alcoves, behind partitions, in rooms that serve other purposes during the day but become bedrooms at night. Each person has found or been assigned their spot, and that spot becomes, in some small way, theirs. Not owned, servants own almost nothing, but occupied. Claimed by use and habit. And despite the cold, despite the discomfort, despite the lack of privacy or softness or warmth, people sleep. They sleep because they must. Because exhaustion overcomes discomfort. Because the body demands rest, and so rest is taken, however inadequate the conditions. And in the morning, they'll wake, stiff, cold, still tired, and begin another day of service to the castle and its lord. But that's tomorrow. For now, in this deep part of the night, they rest as best they can. The castle holds them in its stone embrace, offering what shelter it can, which is more than they'd have outside these walls but less than anyone would want. And you, drifting among them like a benevolent ghost, witness their sleep and understand, perhaps for the first time, what life was truly like for the vast majority of people who lived and worked in medieval castles. Not the lords and ladies whose stories fill the histories. Not the knights whose deeds are celebrated in songs. But the servants, the workers, the people whose labor made castle life possible. They sleep now, scattered and cold and uncomfortable, but they sleep. And in their sleep, they're briefly equal to everyone else in the castle, all reduced to the same fundamental human need for rest, for warmth, for the temporary escape that sleep provides from the hardships of waking life. You find your way now through the sleeping castle to a door that's different from the others. Not larger, necessarily, but somehow more deliberate in its construction, more carefully fitted. The wood is darker, the iron hinges more ornate. Even before you pass through, you sense that the space beyond is set apart, consecrated, held to a different purpose than the practical rooms and corridors you've been exploring. This is the chapel. Nearly every castle has one, because faith is not separate from daily life in this medieval world. It's woven into every moment, every decision, every understanding of how the universe operates. The chapel is where that faith finds its most focused expression, where the household gathers to pray, to hear Mass, to mark the rhythms of the church calendar that structure the year as surely as the seasons do. You slip through the door, and immediately the atmosphere changes. The air feels different here, stiller, more contained, as if the space itself is holding its breath in perpetual reverence. The stone walls rise around you, and you can sense, even in the darkness, that this room has been shaped with particular care. This isn't just another chamber. This is holy ground. The chapel might be located within the keep itself, integrated into the main structure of the castle, accessible by a short stair or corridor from the Lord's private chambers. Or it might be a separate building in the bailey, a distinct structure whose very separation emphasizes its sacred purpose. The placement varies from castle to castle, shaped by the preferences of the builder, the layout of the fortifications, the dictates of space and defense. Some castles even have double chapels, 2 levels, one above the other, occupying the same vertical space but serving different populations. The upper chapel, reached by its own stair, is reserved for the lord and his family, for nobles and important guests. The lower chapel, accessible from ground level, serves the soldiers and servants, the working household. Both spaces share the same sanctity, both offer access to divine grace, but the physical separation reinforces earthly hierarchy even in the presence of God. This chapel appears to be a single space, though it's difficult to judge in the dim light. A few candles burn near the altar. They're never allowed to go out completely, their flames representing the eternal presence of the divine, and their light reveals the room in fragments. stone pillars rising to meet the ceiling, the suggestion of arches overhead, the deep shadows in the corners where the candlelight cannot reach. The architectural style speaks of when this chapel was built. If it's older, from the Romanesque period, you'd see rounded arches, thick pillars, walls that feel massive and solid, windows that are small and deeply recessed. The aesthetic is one of strength, of permanence, of stone shaped to endure until the end of time. If it's newer, built in the Gothic style that has swept through Europe in recent centuries, the arches would be pointed, the pillars more slender, the overall effect reaching upward as if the building itself is praying toward heaven. Look up now, and you can make out the ceiling. Vaulted, certainly, a flat ceiling would be unthinkable in a chapel. The stone curves overhead, ribs meeting at the apex, creating patterns that draw the eye upward and remind the worshipper that there is something beyond this earthly realm. The vaulting might be simple, just a barrel vault following the length of the room. Or it might be more complex, with cross vaults or fan vaults, each section of stone carefully cut and positioned to support the weight above while creating beauty below. The engineering required for such ceilings is remarkable. Each stone must be precisely shaped. The supporting framework of timber, called centering, must be constructed first, holding everything in place until the mortar sets and the stones lock together in compression. Then, miraculously, the centering is removed, and the stone vault holds itself up through the elegant mathematics of weight and force and perfectly positioned keystones. It's faith made visible, the belief that if you build correctly, follow the proper principles, the structure will stand. And it does stand. Has stood, in some cases, for centuries. At the eastern end of the chapel, chapels are almost always oriented with the altar to the east, toward Jerusalem, toward the rising sun and the promise of resurrection. The altar itself commands the space. Its stone, a solid block or perhaps a table with stone supports, covered with a clean linen cloth. Upon the altar, a crucifix, simple or elaborate depending on the castle's wealth. Candlesticks holding those precious, ever-burning candles. Perhaps a small reliquary, a decorated box or container holding a relic, a fragment of saint's bone, a piece of cloth touched to a holy site, something physical connecting this remote castle chapel to the broader mystery of faith and sanctity. Behind the altar, the wall might be painted. Even in the candlelight, you can make out suggestions of color. Perhaps a scene of the crucifixion. Perhaps Christ in majesty, seated in judgment, reminding everyone who enters that their actions are witnessed and will be weighed. Perhaps saints, identifiable by their attributes, Saint George with his dragon, Saint Catherine with her wheel, Saint Christopher carrying the Christ child across the river. These images serve as both decoration and instruction, telling stories to a population where most cannot read. Some chapels contain actual relics of significant importance, and these are treasured beyond measure. A fragment of the true cross, a finger bone of a martyred saint, a vial of holy oil brought back from pilgrimage. These relics aren't merely symbolic, they're believed to carry actual power, to offer protection, to work miracles for those who pray before them with sufficient faith. The presence of such a relic elevates a chapel's status, makes it a destination for prayer, a source of spiritual authority. The windows here are narrow, tall, and deeply recessed into the thick stone walls. During the day, light would stream through them, transformed by the passage through these stone-framed openings into something that feels purer, more refined. If the castle is wealthy, some of these windows might contain colored glass, not elaborate pictorial windows like you'd find in a great cathedral, but simpler pieces, fragments of red and blue and gold assembled into geometric patterns that fracture the light into jeweled colors. Now, at night, The windows are dark rectangles, openings to the blackness outside. No shutters here. This is a sacred space, and the windows are meant to remain open to heaven itself. The cold pours in through them, adding to the chapel's perpetual chill. Stone floors, stone walls, stone ceiling, and those open windows create a space that's always cold, regardless of the season. People come here to worship, not to be comfortable. The cold is part of the experience, a mortification of the flesh that keeps the mind focused on spiritual rather than physical concerns. The walls are lime-washed, painted white or cream to make the space brighter, to reflect what little light is available. But over the years, smoke from candles and incense has darkened them, particularly near the altar and along the ceiling. And where the limewash has worn thin or been deliberately prepared, there are painted decorations. Geometric patterns along the arches, stylized vines and flowers in the corners, perhaps inscriptions in Latin, verses from scripture, prayers that have been repeated so many times that seeing them written on the walls is like hearing them spoken aloud. Latin is the language of the chapel. The Mass is said in Latin, the prayers are in Latin, the hymns are in Latin. Most of the people who worship here don't understand the words. Latin is the language of the educated, the clergy, the scholarly class, but that's not considered a problem. The words themselves are believed to carry power regardless of comprehension. The ritual is what matters. The repetition, the connection to centuries of tradition and to Christians praying the same words in churches and chapels across the entire world. When the household gathers here for daily prayers or for Mass, usually once a day, sometimes more on feast days, the chapel becomes briefly crowded. But even then, there's little seating. Perhaps a few benches or chairs near the front, reserved for the Lord and his immediate family. Everyone else stands or kneels on the cold stone floor. The chapel wasn't designed for comfort but for worship, and worship is active, participatory, embodied. You stand for the gospel. You kneel for prayers. You genuflect when passing the altar. Your body, as much as your voice or your mind, is engaged in the act of devotion. Right now, though, the chapel is empty of people. Just you, drifting like incense smoke through the sacred space, and the eternal presence that believers understand to dwell here. The silence is profound, but it's not emptiness. It's fullness, full of prayer, full of accumulated devotion, full of the countless times people have entered this space carrying their fears and hopes and griefs and laid them before the altar, before the cross, before God. Listen to the silence. It's not quite complete. The candle flames move slightly, creating tiny sounds as wax liquefies and drips. From somewhere in the chapel, perhaps from the vaulted ceiling, perhaps from the walls themselves, comes an occasional faint echo, as if the stone is remembering sounds from earlier, from prayers spoken hours ago or years ago. Outside, distantly, you might hear the call of a night bird or the movement of wind. But these sounds don't intrude so much as emphasize the quietness within. The smell here is distinct. Incense, certainly, even hours after the last service. The scent lingers, frankincense and myrrh, those biblical fragrances that have marked sacred spaces for millennia. Candle wax, beeswax if the chapel is well funded, with its subtle honey sweetness. The mineral smell of stone and limewash, and something else harder to define, the accumulated scent of human devotion, of countless breaths exhaled in prayer, of tears shed and hopes whispered and faith maintained through joy and sorrow alike. Near the entrance, there might be a stoop, a small stone basin set into or against the wall, holding holy water. Everyone who enters is expected to dip their fingers in this water and cross themselves, a gesture of purification and reminder of baptism. The basin is simple, unadorned, functional, but its presence is essential. You don't enter sacred space casually. You prepare yourself. You acknowledge the threshold you're crossing. The floor beneath your feet is stone, like everywhere else in the castle, but smoother here, more carefully finished. Perhaps there are memorial stones set into the floor, marking where notable members of the household are buried. In many castle chapels, the dead rest beneath the very place where the living come to pray, creating a physical connection between this world and the next. The inscriptions might be worn smooth from years of feet passing over them, but they're there, silent testimony to lives lived and ended. Some chapels are positioned near the gatehouse, that most vulnerable point in the castle's defenses. This isn't coincidence. It's deliberate theology made architectural. The chapel's presence sanctifies the entrance, places it under divine protection. Enemies approaching would see the chapel, would know that they're not just attacking stone and timber, but confronting a space defended by powers beyond the material. It's practical faith, using the spiritual to reinforce the physical. Access to the chapel reflects the same hierarchies that govern every other aspect of castle life. The Lord enters when he wishes, prays where he chooses, leaves when he's ready. His family follows in order of rank and importance. Then the senior household members, the knights, the officials. The servants and workers come last, if there's time and space, and they remain at the back, removed from the altar, physically distant from the center of sanctity even as they participate in the same service. But in the night, in the silence, these hierarchies fade somewhat. The chapel simply is present, patient, waiting for dawn when the first service will be said, when voices will rise in chant, when the daily cycle of prayer that structures time itself will begin again. The religious day is divided into hours: matins before dawn, lauds at daybreak, prime, terce, sext, none marking the passage of daylight, vespers at evening, compline before sleep. Each hour with its appointed prayers, its psalms, its structure that connects this castle chapel to every other chapel, every monastery, every cathedral, creating a vast network of simultaneous prayers spanning the Christian world. A monk or priest might live here, attached to the castle household, responsible for maintaining the chapel and conducting services. Or the Lord might have a personal chaplain, a clerk in holy orders who serves both as spiritual advisor and as secretary, using his literacy and learning in the service of both God and his employer. That person has probably already said compline, the final prayers of the day, and retired to whatever modest chamber is provided for them. Or perhaps they're sleeping in the chapel itself, wrapped in a cloak, keeping vigil, maintaining that human presence before the altar through the darkness. You drift toward the altar now, as close as you dare approach this most sacred spot. The candlelight is brighter here, casting dancing shadows across the stone. The crucifix rises above everything, simple or ornate but always commanding. Christ's suffering, rendered in wood or metal or ivory, a reminder of sacrifice, of love expressed through agony, of the central mystery around which this entire faith revolves. And below, the altar stone itself, cold, smooth, consecrated, touched by bishops, anointed with holy oil, transformed from mere rock into something that serves as the meeting point between heaven and earth. When Mass is said here, when the priest speaks the words of consecration over bread and wine, this altar becomes the site of transubstantiation, where the physical is transformed into the divine. It's the most powerful moment in the medieval understanding of existence. God made physically present, accessible, consumable. But now, in the quiet hours between services, the altar simply waits. The candles burn, the shadows dance, and the chapel holds its eternal vigil, neither sleeping nor waking, just being, just remaining, a constant in a world of change, a refuge in stone, a promise that beyond the struggles and suffering of earthly life, there is something more, something better, something worth all the cold stones and uncomfortable kneeling and repeated prayers in languages you don't understand. The chapel represents both piety and power, the Lord's devotion to God and his authority derived from that devotion. A castle with a fine chapel is a castle whose Lord understands that earthly power rests on divine approval, or at least claims to understand it. The chapel is where that relationship is maintained, negotiated, displayed for all to see. It's where the Lord demonstrates that he's not just a warrior or a landowner but a Christian prince, ruling justly under God's law, accountable ultimately not to other men but to heaven itself. And for the servants and soldiers who worship here, the chapel offers something precious, a moment of equality. Before God, the Lord and the lowest servant are the same. Both are sinners. Both need grace. Both will be judged by the same standards when death comes. In the chapel, briefly, the strict hierarchies of castle life soften. Not eliminated, never eliminated, but softened. It's a reminder that earthly status is temporary, while the soul's status is eternal. You begin to withdraw now, drifting back toward the door, leaving the candles to their lonely vigil. But the chapel has imprinted itself on your awareness. Its stillness, its purpose, its patient testimony to faith maintained through centuries. As you pass back through the door into the corridor beyond, you carry some of that peace with you. The knowledge that even in this fortress of stone and iron, of violence prepared for and comfort sacrificed, there is space for the spirit, for prayer, for the belief that life means something beyond survival. The door closes behind you with a soft sound. The corridor welcomes you back into the castle's secular spaces. But the chapel remains, doing what it has always done, what it will always do, standing witness, offering sanctuary, connecting this earthly stronghold to the eternal kingdom that faith promises lies beyond. You climb now, following a spiral staircase that winds upward through the thickness of the wall itself. The steps are narrow, worn smooth by countless boots ascending and descending on watch duty. The staircase is deliberately tight, built clockwise as you climb, which means a defender moving upward has their sword arm free against the central pillar, while an attacker climbing would find their weapon hand blocked. Even the architecture fights. The air grows colder as you rise, and then suddenly you emerge onto the guard walk, that narrow pathway running along the top of the curtain wall. The change is immediate and dramatic. Inside the castle, you've been sheltered, enclosed, protected by stone on all sides. But here, atop the wall, you're exposed. The sky opens above you, vast and dark and scattered with more stars than you've ever seen. The wind hits you immediately, unimpeded, sweeping across the wall top with nothing to slow it. The guard walk is perhaps 4 feet wide, sometimes less. It runs the entire length of the curtain wall, connecting towers and gatehouses, creating a continuous path around the castle's perimeter. On your outer side, the battlements rise, those rhythmic alternations of solid stone sections and open gaps. The solid parts, the merlons, are perhaps 5 feet tall and 3 feet wide, offering protection for guards who duck behind them. The gaps between, the crenelles, are openings through which defenders can observe, shoot arrows, or hurl projectiles down on attackers below. These battlements define the castle's silhouette, creating that distinctive toothy profile that makes castles recognizable even from a distance. They're functional, certainly, but they're also symbolic, a visual declaration that this is a fortified place, a structure built for defense, a stronghold that can and will resist assault. The path beneath your feet is stone, like everything else, but here it's exposed to weather. Rain has washed across it countless times. Snow has accumulated and melted and frozen again. The summer sun has baked it, and always, the wind has scoured it, carrying grit and dust that slowly, incrementally, wears away even stone. The surface is slightly uneven, with puddles in the low spots from yesterday's rain or perhaps from condensation. Walk along the guard walk now, moving as the sentries do, and you feel the exposure keenly. To your right, the battlements offer some protection, but they're not continuous. Every few feet there's a crenel, an opening, a gap where the wind pours through and where your eyes are drawn outward to the landscape beyond. To your left, the inner edge of the wall drops away to the courtyard below, a fall of 30 or 40 feet onto hard-packed earth or cobblestones. There's no railing, no safety barrier. You simply need to be careful, to watch your footing, to respect the height. The guards who walk this path do it regardless of weather. Rain or snow, summer heat or winter cold, day or night, someone is always on the walls. Right now, in the deep hours after midnight, you can see a figure ahead, moving slowly along the walkway. A guard on patrol, wrapped in a heavy cloak against the cold, a spear or pike held loosely, their pace deliberate and unhurried. They stop at a merlin, peer out through the crenel beside it, scanning the darkness beyond the castle walls. Their eyes are adjusted to the night. They've been up here for hours, away from the fires and candles that would ruin night vision. They can see surprisingly well in the starlight, making out the pale line of the road, the darker mass of the forest beyond, the glint of the river in the distance. Nothing moves, nothing threatens. They turn and continue their patrol, their footsteps a steady rhythm against the stone. In times of war, these walls would be crowded with defenders. Men stationed at every crenel, ready to rain arrows down on attackers. Cauldrons of boiling water or oil heated and ready to pour. Stones piled at intervals, waiting to be dropped on anyone who reaches the base of the wall. The air would be filled with shouts and screams, the clash of weapons, the crack of siege engines hurling projectiles against the fortifications. But now, in peacetime, in the deep quiet of a winter night, there might be only a handful of guards on duty, one on each major stretch of wall, perhaps two at the gatehouse, that critical point, another in one of the towers, enough to raise an alarm if needed, but not the standing army that war would require. These guards are maintaining vigilance more from habit and discipline than from any real expectation of danger. At regular intervals along the curtain wall, towers project outward, creating strong points that dominate the wall walk and provide elevated positions for observation and defense. You approach one now, and its presence is imposing even in darkness. The tower rises higher than the wall itself, adding another story or two of height, and it projects outward beyond the wall's face, allowing defenders inside to shoot along the wall's length, catching attackers in crossfire. The design of the tower tells you something about when it was built. Older towers tend to be square or rectangular, simpler to construct, easier to integrate with straight walls. But square towers have a vulnerability. The corners are blind spots, places where the defender's vision is blocked. Later builders recognized this and began constructing round towers instead. A circular tower has no corners, no blind spots. Projectiles striking it tend to deflect rather than impact squarely, and the curved surface is structurally stronger, better able to resist both siege weapons and undermining. This particular tower is round, suggesting it was built during the castle's later development or perhaps was reconstructed after damage. You enter through a narrow doorway, stepping from the exposed wall walk into the tower's relative shelter. Immediately, the wind dies. The temperature, while still cold, feels warmer simply because you're out of the relentless wind. The tower's interior is circular, perhaps 15 feet in diameter, with a vaulted stone ceiling above. Arrow slits pierce the walls at regular intervals, narrow openings that flare outward on the exterior face but widen dramatically on the interior. This flaring allows a defender to shoot out at angles while remaining protected behind thick stone. The opening is barely wide enough for an arrow or crossbow bolt, making it nearly impossible for an attacker to shoot back in effectively. Approach one of these arrow slits now and look out. The view is commanding. From this elevated position, you can see the approach to the castle, the surrounding countryside, the roads that travelers would use. During the day, a guard stationed here could observe for miles. At night, they watch for lights, torches or fires that would indicate movement, perhaps riders approaching, perhaps a threat developing. In this darkness, with no moon, there's nothing to see but the deeper darkness of the landscape and the lighter darkness of the sky. Some of the more recent towers have been modified to include gun loops, openings designed for early firearms. These are circular rather than vertical slits, sized to accommodate the barrel of a handgun or small cannon. The presence of gun loops marks a transition point in military history, where castles evolved to address new threats, new technologies. But such modifications are still relatively rare, confined to the most modern or most threatened fortifications. The guard stationed in this tower is sitting on a small stool, their back against the wall, their weapon leaning beside them. They're not asleep. Sleeping on watch is a serious offense, potentially punishable by death in time of war, but they're not actively alert either. They're in that state of patient wakefulness that experienced soldiers learn, conserving energy while remaining ready to respond if needed. They nod acknowledgement as you drift past, though of course they can't actually see you. It's the wind they're nodding to, perhaps, or their own thoughts, or the eternal presence of duty that fills these cold tower rooms. Climb now up a ladder built into the wall, ascending to the tower's upper level. Here, the ceiling opens to the sky, not fully, but through openings that allow access to the tower's roof. The roof itself is a fighting platform, flat and surrounded by its own set of battlements, providing an even higher vantage point. Standing here, you're at the highest accessible point in the castle's defensive perimeter, able to see in all directions. The wind is fierce at this height, unobstructed by anything. It comes across the countryside, across the fields and forests, gathering speed and cold, and strikes the tower with force enough to make even stone seem vulnerable. A guard stationed here would need to brace against it, to secure their cloak tightly, to speak loudly to be heard over the wind's constant rush. But the view makes the discomfort worthwhile. You can see the entire castle spread below you, its courtyards and buildings rendered in shades of darkness and shadow. You can see the other towers along the wall, their silhouettes darker against the dark sky. You can see the gatehouse, that critical point where the drawbridge rests and where the portcullis waits, ready to drop. And beyond the castle, you can see the world, the fields, the forest, the river catching starlight, the road pale against dark earth, and in the far distance, perhaps the faint glow of a village or the even fainter suggestion of dawn beginning, though dawn is still hours away. The sounds up here are different from anywhere else in the castle. The wind dominates, a constant presence that sometimes rises to a roar and sometimes drops to a whisper but never fully disappears. Within and beneath that wind, other sounds emerge. The footsteps of guards on patrol, their boots against stone, rhythmic and steady. The occasional clink of metal, armor shifting, a sword belt adjusting, chain mail settling. Low voices, too quiet to make out words, as guards stationed at different points call out brief confirmations that all is well. And from the world beyond the walls, sounds drift up. A dog barking in the village, the hoot of an owl hunting in the forest, the splash of something entering the river, a fish jumping, perhaps, or an otter fishing. These sounds connect the castle to the landscape around it, reminding you that this fortress, however isolated it might feel, is part of a larger world, embedded in countryside where life continues regardless of what happens within these walls. Project outward from the wall, you might notice machicolations, stone projections that extend beyond the wall face, with openings in their floor. These allow defenders to drop projectiles directly down onto attackers at the base of the wall, targeting the blind spot that would otherwise be impossible to defend. Earlier castles used wooden hoardings for the same purpose, temporary wooden galleries built out from the wall top during sieges, providing the same capability without the expense and labor of stone construction. But machicolations are permanent, integrated into the wall itself, always ready. The gatehouse, which you can see from here, is the most heavily fortified part of the wall system. It's essentially a castle within a castle, a self-contained strongpoint that can be defended even if the walls are breached. Multiple gates, each secured with massive timbers. The portcullis, that iron grating that can drop in seconds, sealing the passage. Murder holes in the ceiling above the entrance, through which defenders can attack anyone trapped in the passage below. The gatehouse is where the wall defenses and the entrance requirements meet, creating layers of protection that make forcing entry nearly impossible. From this high vantage point, you can see how the defensive system works as a whole. The walls enclosing the bailey, creating that protected interior space. The towers providing strong points and elevated firing positions. The gatehouse controlling access. The keep behind everything, a final refuge if all else fails. It's a system, carefully thought through, each element supporting the others, creating a structure that's far stronger than the sum of its parts. The guards understand this system intimately. They know every weak point, every strong point, every line of sight and blind spot. They know where attackers would likely focus their efforts. They know the procedures for raising the alarm, the horn kept at each guard post, ready to be blown to wake the garrison. The flags or beacons that can be lit to signal to allied forces or nearby villages. The specific shouts and calls that communicate different types of threats. It's a language of defense, learned through training and maintained through these quiet watches. But tonight, there is no threat. The countryside beyond the walls is peaceful. The road is empty. The forest is dark and still. The guards maintain their vigil not because danger is imminent, but because danger might always be imminent. Because vigilance is the price of security. Because castles stand only as long as someone is willing to stand on the walls and watch. A guard approaches, completing their circuit of this section of wall. They pause at a crenel, look out at the darkness, then turn and walk back the way they came. Their cloak swirls in the wind. Their breath forms clouds that are immediately torn apart and carried away. They're cold, certainly, and probably tired, and possibly wondering how many more hours until their watch ends and they can descend to relative warmth and rest. But they don't complain. This is the duty. This is the service they provide in exchange for food and shelter and whatever small wages the castle pays. The stars above are impossibly bright, undimmed by any light pollution, scattered across the sky in their thousands. The guards know the stars, use them to mark the passage of time during the night watch. Certain stars rise at certain hours. Constellations move across the sky in predictable patterns. The North Star remains fixed, reliable, a point of orientation in the darkness. These guards, spending their nights exposed to the sky, know the heavens better than most, have watched the stars turn through countless watches, have marked the seasons by which constellations are visible. Time moves differently on the walls. Each watch feels long, stretched out by cold and darkness and the absence of activity. But the night passes, slowly but inevitably. Stars move, the wind shifts. The coldest hour comes, just before dawn, when even the earth seems to give up its last warmth. And then, eventually, the sky begins to change. Not yet, not for hours yet, but it will come. Dawn always comes. For now, the guards continue their patrol. Back and forth along the wall walk, up and down the tower stairs, checking each section, each potential vulnerability, watching the darkness, listening to the night, maintaining the vigilance that keeps everyone sleeping safely below. It's monotonous work, unglamorous, uncomfortable, but it's essential. Without these guards on the walls, the castle is just stone and timber. With them, it's a functioning fortress, active and defended, ready to protect those who shelter within. You begin to descend now, following the spiral stair back down into the wall's interior, leaving the guards to their watch. The wind fades as you enter the shelter of stone. The temperature rises slightly. The exposed feeling of the wall walk gives way to the enclosed security of interior spaces. But you carry with you an understanding of what it means to stand guard through the night, to endure cold and wind and darkness so that others can sleep peacefully, to be the barrier between the castle's security and the world's dangers. The walls stand, the towers rise, the guards watch, and the castle, defended by stone and vigilance and human determination, holds back the darkness for another night. You descend from the walls, from the towers, from the high places where guards have maintained their vigil through the night, down spiral stairs worn smooth by centuries, through corridors still holding the deep cold of the darkest hours. And you emerge once more into the courtyard, that open heart of the castle, just as the world is beginning its transformation from night to day. The sky above is no longer fully dark. That absolute blackness of midnight has given way to something softer, something that suggests the possibility of light even though no light is yet visible. The stars are fading, not gone but diminishing, their brilliance overwhelmed by something brighter approaching from beyond the eastern horizon. The air itself seems to be holding its breath, poised between darkness and dawn, between the world of night and the world of day. Look toward the eastern wall, and you can see it beginning. Not the sun itself, that won't appear for several more minutes, but the light that precedes it. The sky beyond the battlements is changing, shifting from black to deep blue, then to lighter blue, and now, just at the horizon line, a band of pale color is emerging. Not quite yellow, not quite orange, but something in between. A glow, a promise, the announcement that darkness, however deep, is never permanent. That first light touches the highest points of the castle first. The top of the keep, rising above everything else. The towers along the curtain wall. The weather vane or flag that might mark the highest accessible point. These catch the approaching dawn and seem to ignite, their stone surfaces shifting from the uniform gray of night to something warmer, touched with gold and amber. It's a gradual transformation, not sudden, spreading downward stone by stone as the light angle changes. The courtyard itself is still in shadow, protected from direct sunlight by the walls that surround it. But the quality of darkness has changed. Where an hour ago you could barely distinguish shapes, now you can see clearly. The well in the center, the stables along one wall, the storage buildings and workshops, the carts and barrels and tools scattered about. Everything is visible, rendered in the soft, indirect light of pre-dawn. The stones beneath your feet are wet with dew. Overnight, moisture has condensed from the air onto every surface, the packed earth, the cobblestones, the walls themselves. Everything glistens slightly, and where you can see the stones directly, they're dark with dampness. This dampness will burn off quickly once the sun rises fully, evaporating back into air. But for now it transforms the courtyard's appearance, making everything look freshly washed, clean, renewed. Mist hangs in the air, thin and ephemeral, gathered in the lowest spots where cold air has settled. Near the well, there's a visible layer of it, perhaps knee-high, catching the growing light and seeming to glow from within. It's beautiful in a transient way, this mist, something that exists only in the transition between night and day, between cold and warmth. Within an hour, it will be completely gone, burned away by sunshine, leaving no trace that it ever existed. The silence of deep night is breaking. The first sound comes from the stables. A rooster, perched somewhere in or near the structure, throws back its head and crows. The sound is harsh and triumphant, a declaration of territory and time, announcing to the world that dawn has come and a new day is beginning. Other roosters answer from different parts of the bailey, from the outer ward, perhaps from the village beyond the walls. It's a chorus, uncoordinated but enthusiastic, the universal sound of morning in the medieval world. The horses hear the roosters and begin to stir. You can hear them in their stalls, shifting position, stamping hooves against the packed earth floor. One of them whinnies softly, a questioning sound. Another responds. There's the sound of hay being pulled from mangers, of large animals moving in confined spaces, of the particular creaking and settling that comes from a stable waking up. Soon someone will need to tend them, water them, feed them properly, muck out the stalls. But for now they're simply transitioning from sleep to wakefulness in their own time. On the walls, the changing of the guard is underway. You can see figures moving along the wall walk, one set of guards making their way down the stairs while fresh guards climb up to replace them. The night watch is ending. Those who've spent the dark hours exposed to wind and cold are being relieved, allowed to descend to warmth and food and rest. The new guards are fresher, though probably not eager. Nobody is eager to stand watch, but they're taking up their positions, assuming the responsibility of vigilance as their predecessors shuffle wearily toward the keep and whatever breakfast awaits them. A door opens in the kitchen building, and a servant emerges, moving quickly across the courtyard toward the well. A wooden bucket swings from their hand. They're wrapped in layers against the cold, their breath forming clouds in the chilly air. This is probably one of the kitchen boys, sent to fetch the first water of the day. The kitchen fires need to be rebuilt from their banked embers, and water is essential for cooking, for washing, for all the day's activities. They reach the well, secure the bucket to the rope, and begin lowering it. The rope runs through a pulley with a rhythmic creaking sound. Down the bucket goes, into the darkness of the well shaft, until finally there's a distant splash as it hits the water far below. A pause while the bucket fills, then the laborious process of hauling it back up. Hand over hand, the servant pulls, the rope running through their calloused hands, the full bucket emerging inch by inch. It's heavy work. A bucket of water weighs considerably more than an empty bucket, but it's necessary work, repeated multiple times every day, year after year, for as long as the castle stands. From the kitchen itself, smoke begins to rise. Someone inside has been working on the fires, adding wood to the glowing embers, coaxing flames back to life. The smoke is thin at first, barely visible against the lightening sky, but it thickens as the fires catch properly. Soon there will be multiple columns of smoke rising from different buildings. Kitchens, workshops, chambers with their own hearths, all adding their contribution to the morning air. The smell of smoke reaches you, carried on the light breeze that's beginning to move through the courtyard as temperature differences develop. Wood smoke, that pervasive medieval scent, mixing now with other morning smells. The dampness of earth and stone. The sharper smell of manure from the stables and animal pens. Not unpleasant exactly, just honest, earthy. The smell of animals and agriculture that defines rural life. The faint scent of herbs from the kitchen garden, released as dew evaporates from their leaves. More servants are appearing now, emerging from whatever corners they claimed for sleep. They move with the slow deliberation of people not yet fully awake, people whose bodies are cold and stiff from a night on hard surfaces. One heads toward the stables, probably a groom, preparing to care for the horses. Another moves toward the kitchen, joining the work that's already beginning there. A third crosses toward one of the storage buildings, perhaps to fetch supplies needed for the day's tasks. The dogs are waking too, stretching and shaking themselves, their tags jingling if they wear collars. They patrol the courtyard, checking their territory, investigating any changes from the night before. One pauses to lap water from a puddle. Another trots purposefully toward the kitchen, knowing from experience that interesting scraps sometimes become available at this hour. A third simply lies down in a spot where the first direct sunlight is hitting the ground, smart enough to claim the warmest available position. From the chicken coop, cackling and clucking sounds indicate the hens are awake and restless. Soon someone will let them out to roam the bailey, pecking and scratching for insects and seeds. They're remarkably effective pest control, eating grubs and beetles that would otherwise infest the grain stores. And of course they provide eggs, gathered daily, essential for cooking and baking. Near the workshops, a blacksmith is preparing for the day's labor. You can hear the distinctive sound of his forge being prepared, the scrape of ash being cleared from the hearth, the clank of tools being arranged, and then the particular whoosh as he works the bellows, forcing air across coals to bring them to working temperature. Soon there will be the ring of hammer on anvil, that metallic percussion that will sound periodically throughout the day as he repairs tools, shoes horses, and creates whatever iron goods the castle requires. Carts are being checked and readied. A servant examines wheels, testing them for soundness. Another greases an axle, working the thick tallow into place with their hands. These carts will be used today for various purposes, hauling firewood from the stores, moving supplies from storage to workplace, perhaps transporting goods if anyone is traveling to or from the castle. Everything must be checked, maintained, kept in working order. In a world without spare parts or quick replacements, preventive maintenance is essential. The chapel bell rings, clear and bright in the morning air. It's calling the household to morning prayers, to lauds or prime depending on the specific hour and the practices of this particular household. The sound carries across the courtyard, across the bailey, out beyond the walls to the fields and villages beyond. It's both a call to worship and a time marker, dividing the day into manageable segments, providing structure to the hours ahead. In response to the bell, more people emerge from buildings and doorways. The Lord and his family will attend chapel before breaking their fast. Senior household members will join them. Servants who can be spared from essential morning tasks will come too, crowding into the chapel's limited space, kneeling on cold stone, participating in the ritual that sanctifies the day's beginning. But not everyone can stop work for prayers. The kitchen staff continues their labor. Food must be prepared regardless. The guards on the walls remain at their posts. The groom in the stables keeps working, The horses don't care about religious schedules. Faith is important, central to medieval life, but so is pragmatism. The work that can't stop doesn't stop, and God, presumably, understands. The sun finally breaks the horizon, and everything changes. That indirect, gentle pre-dawn light is replaced by direct, brilliant sunshine. It pours into the courtyard wherever the walls allow, creating stark contrasts of light and shadow. Where the sun touches, everything seems to come alive. Colors that were muted in the gray light suddenly appear vivid. The stone walls transform from gray to warm honey-colored gold. The dampness begins to steam slightly as evaporation accelerates. The cold that settled during the night starts to lift, slowly but perceptibly. The shadows are extraordinarily long at this hour, stretching across the courtyard from west to east. The well casts a shadow perhaps 30 feet long. The people moving about trail shadows behind them like cloaks. Every object, every unevenness in the ground, every cart and barrel and tool creates its own shadow, producing a complex pattern of light and dark across the bailey floor. More servants are active now. The courtyard is filling with purposeful movement. Water is being carried. Firewood is being brought from storage. Animals are being tended. Tools are being retrieved and taken to wherever work awaits. It's not frantic. Medieval labor doesn't move at modern speed, but it's steady, purposeful. The beginning of the day's routine that will continue until darkness falls again. A gate in the inner curtain wall opens, and someone leads a horse through, perhaps preparing to ride out on some errand. The horse's hooves clop against the cobblestones, a hollow, rhythmic sound. Its tack jingles. It tosses its head, sensing the morning, perhaps anticipating exercise after a night confined to its stall. The rider speaks to it softly, calming words, establishing that human-animal connection that's essential when your transportation has its own will and opinions. From the gatehouse, there's the sound of chains and timber as the drawbridge is lowered. It descends with a groaning of wood and metal, settling into place with a solid thump. The portcullis is raised, iron grating sliding upward into the stone above. The castle is opening itself to the world, transforming from a sealed fortress into an accessible stronghold. During the day, people will come and go, merchants, messengers, peasants bringing goods or seeking justice, travelers requesting hospitality. But at night, as you've witnessed, all these openings will be secured again. The first of the day's visitors might already be approaching. A farmer from a nearby village, perhaps, bringing eggs or milk or cheese to sell to the castle household. Or a messenger carrying letters and news from beyond. They'll see the castle as you saw it initially. Imposing walls, formidable towers, smoke rising from within. The banner flying from the keep announcing whose stronghold this is. They'll cross the drawbridge, pass under the gatehouse's watchful openings, and enter the bailey where you now drift. The mist is nearly gone, burned away by the strengthening sunlight. Only the deepest shadows still hold wisps of it. The dew is evaporating too, though the stones will remain damp for another hour at least. The courtyard is transforming from the quiet, empty space of night into the busy, populated workspace of day. The transition is gradual but inexorable, following patterns established over years, over generations, over centuries of castle life. A bell rings again, different from the chapel bell, probably from the keep, signaling that breakfast is ready in the great hall. The household will gather soon, those who've been at prayers emerging from the chapel, others arriving from their various tasks and sleeping places. They'll break their fast together, eating bread and perhaps porridge, drinking ale, preparing themselves for the day's labor ahead. You've journeyed through an entire night now, from sunset in this very courtyard to sunrise returning here. You've witnessed the castle in its various aspects: fortified entrance, working kitchen, formal hall, sleeping chambers both noble and humble, sacred chapel, defensive walls, and now the courtyard awakening to a new day. You've seen how this fortress functions, how it protects and houses and feeds its population, how it stands as both home and stronghold. The medieval castle is not comfortable by modern standards. It's cold and drafty and smoky and damp. Privacy is rare. Hygiene is basic. Labor is constant and physically demanding. But it works. It functions. It provides what its inhabitants need most: security, shelter, community, purpose. Within these walls, life continues its eternal patterns: births and deaths, joys and sorrows, work and rest, all contained within the protective embrace of stone. The sun climbs higher. The shadows shrink. The courtyard fills with activity and sound. Voices calling, animals moving, tools being used. The endless business of maintaining a household of this size and complexity. Another day has begun in the castle. Another rotation of the sun around which all medieval life revolves. And you, having witnessed the night's passage, having drifted through every space from gatehouse to tower top, from kitchen hearth to chapel altar, having seen how the castle lives and breathes through the dark hours, you fade now as the daylight strengthens. Your journey is complete. The peaceful night inside a medieval castle has given way to morning, and with morning comes the world of the living, the working, the visible. But the night will return. It always does. And when darkness falls again, the castle will transform once more. Fires will be banked, gates will close, guards will climb to the walls, servants will seek their scattered sleeping places, and the great stone fortress will settle into its nighttime existence, patient and enduring, waiting once more for dawn. The sun has fully risen now, climbing steadily into a clear sky. The castle courtyard is alive with activity and sound, the rhythm of daily life that will continue until darkness falls again. You've witnessed the complete cycle, from sunset to sunrise, from the closing of gates to their opening, from the castle sealed and sleeping to the castle awake and working. Your journey through the night is complete. You've drifted through every space this fortress contains. You've seen the outer defenses, those massive curtain walls and towers where guards maintained their vigilant watch through the cold and darkness. You've felt the wind on the battlements, understood the exposure and discomfort that sentries endure so that others can sleep safely. You've seen how the defensive systems work together. Walls and towers and gatehouses creating layers of protection that make this castle nearly impregnable. You've experienced the kitchen in its smoky warmth, that hot and busy workspace where food is transformed from raw ingredients into sustenance for an entire household. The great hearths with their glowing coals, the bread ovens radiating heat, the pots of pottage simmering patiently, the barrels of ale and bundles of dried herbs hanging from beams. You've understood that this room, uncomfortable as it is, represents survival itself. The endless work of feeding people, of maintaining life, of turning the castle's stored provisions into meals that sustain everyone from lord to servant. You've stood in the great hall, that magnificent space where the household gathers, and you've seen it in its nighttime stillness. Empty of people but full of presence. The high ceiling disappearing into shadow. The tapestries softening the stone walls. The dais where the Lord presides. The rushes scattered across the floor. You've understood how this single room serves so many purposes. Dining hall and courtroom, workspace and bedroom. The public heart of castle life where hierarchy is displayed and community is enacted. You've witnessed sleeping in all its medieval variety. The Lord's chamber with its curtained bed, its relative privacy and comfort, though even there the cold seeps through stone walls and drafts find every gap. And you've seen where the servants sleep, scattered throughout the castle wherever space allows, on thin straw pallets, wrapped in insufficient blankets, sharing whatever warmth they can generate, privacy non-existent, comfort barely considered. The contrast is stark, a physical manifestation of medieval hierarchy, yet everyone sleeps eventually, reduced by exhaustion to the same fundamental human need for rest. You've knelt in the chapel, that sacred space set apart from the castle's secular functions. You've felt the stillness there, the sense of accumulated prayer, the candles burning eternally before the altar. You've understood how faith permeates every aspect of medieval life, not separate from daily existence but woven into it, structuring time through the canonical hours, providing meaning and comfort and moral framework. The chapel is both refuge and reminder, offering hope for the afterlife while insisting on right behavior in this one. You've climbed to the highest towers and walked the guard paths along the walls. You've seen the landscape spread below in darkness, dotted with the occasional light from distant villages. You've felt the wind's relentless pressure and the cold's deep penetration. You've understood what it means to stand watch through the night, maintaining vigilance not because danger is imminent but because it might always be imminent, because security requires constant attention, because castles stand only as long as someone is willing to guard them. And you've returned, as dawn broke, to the courtyard where your journey began. You've watched the transformation from darkness to light, from stillness to activity, from the castle sealed and inward focused to the castle opening itself to the world beyond its walls. You've seen the drawbridge lowered, the gates opened, the household emerging to begin another day of medieval life. What have you learned from this journey? What understanding have you gained from drifting through these spaces, witnessing these hours? Perhaps you've learned that medieval castles were not the romantic places that stories and imagination often paint them. They were cold. They were uncomfortable. They were smoky and damp and drafty and smelled of things we'd find unpleasant. Privacy was rare. Hygiene was basic. Comfort, as we understand it, was hardly considered. Life within these walls was hard in ways that modern existence has almost entirely eliminated. But you've also learned that these castles worked. They functioned. They provided what their inhabitants needed most: protection from a genuinely dangerous world, shelter from weather that could kill, community in a landscape that was often isolated and lonely, structure and purpose in lives that might otherwise be overwhelmed by uncertainty and chaos. The castle is, above all, practical. Every element serves a purpose. The thick walls keep out both enemies and weather. The towers provide observation points and defensive positions. The gatehouse controls access. The keep offers a final refuge. The Great Hall provides space for the household to gather. The kitchen feeds everyone. The chapel tends to spiritual needs. The walls enable defense. Every stone, every room, every architectural choice is functional, designed to solve real problems faced by real people. And those people, you've seen them too, or at least glimpsed their presence. The Lord, sleeping in relative comfort but bearing the weight of responsibility for everyone within his walls. His family, enjoying privilege but also constrained by expectations and duty. The knights and soldiers, trading service for security and status. The servants and workers, giving their labor in exchange for food and shelter and the protection those walls provide. The kitchen staff and grooms and craftsmen and guards, all the people whose work makes castle life possible. They're not so different from us, really, these medieval inhabitants. They love and fear and hope and worry. They form friendships and rivalries. They take pride in their work or resent their duties. They find moments of joy in hard lives. They gossip and joke and complain. They're human, facing human problems with the tools and understanding available to them in their time and place. The castle shapes their lives in fundamental ways. It determines where they sleep, how they eat, whom they interact with, what their days look like. It provides security but also imposes constraints. The walls that keep danger out also keep people in, creating a closed community where everyone knows everyone else, where privacy is nearly impossible, where your place in the hierarchy is constantly visible and reinforced. Living in a castle means accepting discomfort. It means being cold more often than warm. It means eating what's available rather than what you prefer. It means sleeping when and where you can rather than in spaces designed for rest. It means constant smoke in your lungs and the smell of unwashed bodies and animals. It means understanding that stone, however impressive, is still just stone. It shelters but doesn't comfort. It protects but doesn't embrace. Yet despite all this, people thrived here. They raised families. They celebrated feast days. They took satisfaction in work well done. They found meaning in faith and community. They adapted to the discomfort until it became simply normal. The way life is, not particularly questioned because there's no alternative within reach. The castle at night reveals itself most fully. During the day, activity and sunlight can distract from the fundamental nature of these fortresses. But at night, when the gates close and the household turns inward, when darkness presses against the walls and cold seeps through stone, the castle shows what it truly is: a refuge, yes, but also a prison of sorts. A necessary compromise between freedom and safety. A place where security is purchased at the cost of comfort and privacy and ease. The sounds of night that you've heard, footsteps echoing in stone corridors, wind whistling through arrow slits, fires crackling in hearths, the rhythmic pacing of guards on the walls, the snoring of sleepers on straw pallets, the creaking of timber and settling of stone. These are the authentic sounds of medieval life. Not the clash of swords or the fanfare of tournaments, but the quieter, more constant sounds of daily existence. Maintenance and vigilance. Work and rest. The eternal cycle repeated night after night, generation after generation. And the smells, smoke above all, that pervasive medieval scent that marks every indoor space. But also bread baking and pottage simmering, horses and hay, damp stone and burning candles, herbs and incense, unwashed wool and human bodies. These are the smells that would greet you if you could truly step into this world, the olfactory reality that no painting or tapestry can convey. The castle you've explored tonight is not unique. Hundreds like it dotted the medieval landscape, each one sheltering its household, each one serving as fortress and home. Some were grander, some more modest. Some were nearly impregnable, others fell to determined attackers. But they all shared these fundamental characteristics: stone walls enclosing a protected space, a household living according to strict hierarchy, servants sleeping wherever they could, guards watching through the night, faith structuring time and behavior, discomfort accepted as normal. Many of these castles still stand, their stones enduring centuries after the people who built and inhabited them have turned to dust. You can visit them, walk their courtyards, climb their towers, stand where guards once stood. But they're empty now, all filled with tourists and interpretation panels. The lived reality, the smoke and cold and smells and sounds, the fear and faith and daily labor, that's gone, accessible only through imagination and historical reconstruction. That's what you've experienced tonight. A reconstruction of that lost reality. An attempt to show not just what castles looked like, but what they felt like, sounded like, smelled like. what it was truly like to live within those impressive walls, to sleep on cold stone, to wake to the smell of smoke and the sound of roosters crowing, to spend your days in service to a lord or in maintenance of the fortress itself. The sun climbs higher now. The morning is well advanced. The castle has fully transitioned from its nighttime existence to its daytime operations. Carts are rolling through the gate, bringing supplies or carrying away waste. Craftsmen are at their work. You can hear the blacksmith's hammer, the carpenter's saw, the rhythmic sounds of labor. Voices call across the courtyard. Animals move through their daily routines. Life continues, as it always has, as it always will as long as the castle stands and people inhabit it. Your presence here has been invisible, insubstantial, a consciousness drifting through space and time. You've witnessed without participating, observed without being seen. It's an impossible vantage point, of course. No medieval person could have experienced their own castle this way, seeing every space, understanding the whole system. They knew only their piece of it, their duties, their limited perspective shaped by rank and role. But you've seen it all, from the highest tower to the lowest storage room, from the lord's private chamber to the servants' scattered pallets, from the sacred chapel to the smoky kitchen, from the vulnerable gateway to the inner keep that serves as last refuge. You understand now how the pieces fit together, how the castle functions as an integrated whole, each element supporting the others. And perhaps you've gained some appreciation for the people who designed and built and inhabited these extraordinary structures. The vision required to imagine a castle, the resources needed to build one, the skill demanded from masons and carpenters and smiths, the organization necessary to maintain a household of dozens or hundreds, the courage or desperation that made people willing to live in these cold, uncomfortable, constrained spaces in exchange for the protection they provided. Medieval life was hard. That's the inescapable truth. Hard in ways that modern comfort has allowed us to forget. The cold alone, the relentless, penetrating cold of stone buildings in winter, would be almost unbearable to us. Add to that the smoke, the smells, the lack of privacy, the constant labor, the limited diet, the ever-present threat of disease and violence, and you have an existence that most of us would find intolerable. Yet they tolerated it. More than tolerated, they built remarkable things, created art and literature, maintained faith, raised families, found meaning and purpose. They were not defeated by the harshness of their circumstances. They adapted, endured, and sometimes even thrived. The castle was their tool for survival. Not a perfect tool, nothing human-made ever is, but an effective one. Within these walls, they found the security that allowed them to build lives, to plan beyond the immediate moment, to accumulate wealth and knowledge and pass them to the next generation. The castle made civilization possible in a dangerous world. As you prepare to leave this place, to return to your own time and world, take one last look around. The courtyard bathed in morning sunlight, the walls rising solid and permanent, the towers standing sentinel, the keep dominating the interior space, the gate standing open to the world, the household moving through their daily work. This is a castle functioning as castles were meant to function, protecting, sheltering, organizing, enabling life to continue despite the dangers that lurk beyond the walls. The night you've witnessed is past. Dawn has given way to morning, and morning will give way to afternoon, and afternoon to evening, and evening to night again. The cycle continues endlessly, the rhythm of castle life repeating day after day, season after season, year after year. The stones endure, the walls stand, the household carries on, and somewhere, always, a guard walks the battlements, maintaining the vigilance that has defined fortress life since the first human beings decided that walls and height and organized defense were preferable to vulnerability in the open. Thank you for taking this journey through a peaceful night inside a medieval castle, for witnessing these spaces and understanding, perhaps a little better, what life was truly like within these walls, for seeing beyond the romance and legend to the practical, uncomfortable, deeply human reality of medieval existence, for spending these hours in the company of people long dead, whose lives and choices and daily struggles have shaped the world that came after them. The castle stands, the sun shines, the day continues, and you carry with you now the knowledge of what it meant to live in these places, to sleep in these spaces, to endure these conditions, to call a fortress home. May you sleep more comfortably tonight, in your own time, with gratitude for the warmth and softness and privacy and ease that separate your world from theirs.